My son cut me off from his life for 20 years. No calls, no replies. Every attempt I made to reach him ignored until I became rich. Suddenly, he invited me to Christmas as if nothing had happened. I agreed, but I already had a plan. When I walked into his home, I smiled and said, "I have a surprise for you." I saw their eyes light up with expectation, certain it was a check with their names on it. But when they finally saw what I'd given, the color drained from their faces and every smile in the room vanished. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. There are moments in life that don't just happen, they settle in your bones and stay there waiting. That night at Ethan's house was one of them. The way the warm light from his chandelier poured over the table. The way every fork and glass seemed perfectly placed for a celebration. The way their smiles, wide and rehearsed, were really just masks stretched tight over greed. I could see it. I could feel it. And I had been waiting 20 years for it. But to understand why I stood there, coat still on hand steady while they waited for their prize. You need to know what those 20 years looked like from my side of the silence. It started like most endings with a phone call I wasn't expecting. It was the first week of December, cold enough in Lincoln that the air bit at your lungs the moment you stepped outside. The sun had been down for hours, and I'd just settled into my usual evening routine, a simple dinner, a glass of red wine, and the quiet hum of my old furnace in the background. The phone rang. At first, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. These days, the numbers that lit up my caller ID were rarely anyone I wanted to talk to. Telemarketers, wrong numbers, the occasional old acquaintance who wanted to catch up but really just wanted something. But then I saw the name Ethan Carter. For a moment, I thought it must be a mistake. My thumb hovered over the answer button. 20 years of nothing, and now this. My heart was steady, but my mind was a storm. I answered, "Dad." That voice, it hit me like an old photograph you didn't know you'd kept. The same tone, older now, but with that familiar undercurrent I could never quite name when he was younger. A mix of charm and calculation. I swallowed once before speaking. "This is unexpected," I said, letting my words come out slow. "Yeah, well," he gave a little laugh, the same one he used when he was 12 and trying to talk his way out of trouble. "It's been too long. We were thinking, me and Maddie, it might be nice to have you over for Christmas dinner. You know, family time. Family time." The words landed in my chest like a weight. He'd spent 2 decades making sure I didn't have any. That's so I asked, my tone as flat as the ice outside. He filled the silence quickly. "Yeah, Maddie's been talking about it for weeks. She's making her prime rib. The kids will be there. It would mean a lot." I didn't answer right away. I let him talk. Let him keep building this image of a warm family gathering like a salesman dressing up a bad product. Then he slipped it in almost casually. "And you know, I heard you've been doing really well. That big property deal. Congratulations. Must feel good." There it was. The real reason for the call. Not reconciliation, not guilt. Opportunity. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the frost crawling across my kitchen window. "Doing well enough," I said. "I'll be there." Then, after a pause just long enough for him to wonder what I meant, "And I have a surprise for you." He laughed again, softer this time. "That's great, Dad. Can't wait." We hung up. The kitchen felt different after that call, like the air itself had shifted. Outside, snow had begun to fall, thick and steady, settling on the quiet street. The kind of snow that erases footprints, that makes the world look untouched, even if you know it's not. On the table in front of me, my coffee had gone cold. I set it aside and pulled closer the manila folder I'd been working on for months. Inside, bank statements, property records, printouts of social media posts, and a few photographs I'd taken myself. The plan hadn't started with Ethan's call. It had started long before, back when I realized that sometimes the best way to answer silence is with patience. That night, I stayed at the table long after the call. The clock on the wall ticked steady, marking each second with the precision of a metronome. I thought about the last time I'd heard his voice in person 2 decades earlier in a house that no longer belonged to me. I thought about the birthdays where I'd wrapped gifts that never got opened. The cards I'd mailed that always came back with "Return to Cinders" stamped in red. I thought about the winters I'd spent alone. The only sound in the house, the wind rattling the windows. And I thought about how quickly that silence had ended the moment money entered the picture. I got up, crossed the kitchen, and poured the coffee down the sink. It was bitter anyway. Then I went to the window and watched the snow pile higher on the branches of the maple in my yard. The street light outside cast a pale gold circle onto the drifts. And for a moment, I could almost see another winter, another December when things were different. That was before Ethan learned how easy it is to erase someone from your life. Before I learned how to live without needing to be wanted. When I finally turned away from the window, I knew two things for certain. 1. Ethan thought he was in control of whatever would happen on Christmas. 2. He had no idea who he was really dealing with anymore. That week moved slowly, the way time does when you're waiting for something you've planned down to the smallest detail. I went through my days as usual, grocery shopping, reading the paper, taking my morning walks through the snow-packed sidewalks. But underneath it all, there was a current, a quiet anticipation. Every so often, I'd open the folder again, adding another note, another piece of the puzzle, a copy of a bankruptcy filing here, a screenshot of a Facebook post there. It was all part of the same picture, one I intended to show him when the moment was right. On the morning of Christmas Eve, I took my time getting ready. I shaved carefully, put on the navy sweater I only wore for special occasions, and laced up my polished shoes. I wanted to look like a man who had nothing to hide. The drive across town was quiet. Lincoln's streets were lined with houses glowing with lights, the snow banks reflecting reds and greens from porch decorations. People were already gathering inside their windows, fogged from the warmth, laughter spilling faintly into the night. Ethan's neighborhood was newer rows of nearly identical houses, each with its own attempt at holiday charm. His was lit just enough to look inviting, but not enough to look expensive. When I pulled up, I could see shapes moving in the living room window. I took a moment before getting out of the car, just watching. Then I stepped into the cold, the crunch of snow under my shoes, loud in the stillness. Ethan opened the door before I knocked. "Dad," he said, smiling like we'd been talking every week for years. "You made it. Come in. Come in." Maddie was behind him, just as quick with her welcome. "So good to see you, Stanley," she said. "You look prosperous." I smiled back, but not for them. "Thank you for having me," I said, taking off my coat. "I brought something special." Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, just enough to confirm what I already knew. They thought they were about to get exactly what they wanted. And that was the beauty of it, because what I'd brought wasn't what they expected. Not even close. Not even close. The words repeated in my head like the steady tick of a clock as I stepped further into Ethan's living room, letting the heat from the fireplace roll over me. The place smelled of cinnamon roasted meat and polished ambition. Maddie's famous prime rib Ethan had bragged over the phone. The tree sparkled in the corner, every ornament in perfect symmetry. The garland was draped with mathematical precision. Even the wrapped gifts under the tree looked like they'd been staged for a catalog photo. It was a house that screamed, "Look how well we're doing." But I knew better. Years in real estate will teach you to read a room the way a surgeon reads an X-ray. There was something forced about the shine. A little too much effort in every detail. Ethan took my coat with exaggerated warmth, hanging it in a closet that smelled faintly of cedar. "You made it," he said, that practiced smile, never faltering. "Traffic wasn't too bad, huh?" "Light," I said, my eyes already scanning the dining room beyond him. 12 place settings, crystal glasses, linen napkins folded into perfect triangles. This wasn't a cozy family dinner. This was theater. Maddie swept in her perfume, arriving a half-second before she did, pressing a wine glass into my hand before I could say no. "Cabernet," she said sweetly. "I remember you liked that." I took a sip, slow, smooth, expensive, meant to impress, meant to disarm. And then I saw them, two teenagers, on the couch, Ava and Jake, my grandchildren in theory. They looked up briefly, polite smiles on autopilot before sinking back into the blue glow of their phones. No curiosity, no recognition. You can't miss what you never knew. That little moment, the disconnect in their eyes pulled me backward 20 years to the night I lost Ethan for good. It was December 2002. Lincoln winters are sharp enough to cut through bone, but that night I didn't feel the cold. I just finished shoveling the walkway, thinking how Linda would smile when she saw it clear for the morning. Back then, Ethan was 18 and still living at home, though more and more of his life was spent out with friends or glued to the phone. Money was tight. My construction business had hit a slow season, but I made sure the bills were paid, his car insurance covered, and there was gas in his tank. He wanted name-brand sneakers. I worked an extra Saturday shift to get them. He wanted a better stereo for his car. I sold my old watch to make it happen. I thought that was what fathers did. That night, I walked in from the cold, stomping snow from my boots when I heard voices in the kitchen. One was Linda's lighter than I'd heard it in years. The other was Robert Weston. I knew Robert, regional manager at her insurance company. He was the kind of man who shook your hand while looking over your shoulder for someone more important. His cologne hit me before his words did, rich, sharp, invasive. And Ethan's so smart, Linda was saying. He could do so much more with the right influence. Stanley works hard, Robert said mildly. But well, stability is important, too. I can offer that. I stepped into the doorway. Linda's face froze mid-laugh. Robert didn't even look surprised. What's going on? I asked, though the answer was already there in the air between us. Linda straightened her voice, suddenly businesslike. We're making some changes, Stanley. I'm moving out with Robert, and Ethan's coming with us. My gaze went to my son, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. Ethan. He looked at me, but there was no hesitation in his eyes. Mom's right. You've been stuck. Always saying things will get better, but they never do. I'm tired of waiting. That hit harder than I'd ever admit out loud. I'd worked overtime, missed meals, worn the same winter coat, 3 years running, so he could have what he wanted. And here he was calling me stuck. Linda's voice softened, but it was just another tactic. It's better this way. Robert has connections. He can get Ethan into a good internship. Real money, real opportunities. You can visit my own son. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake sense into him. But the truth was in his face. Ethan had already made his choice. The divorce came fast. Linda got the house, the car, and Ethan's loyalty. I got an apartment with leaky pipes and the sound of strangers through thin walls. The first Christmas after I mailed Ethan a gift and a card with a $100 bill inside. It came back unopened, returned to sender, stamped in red. The next year, I tried again. Same result. By the third year, I stopped sending anything. Dad, Ethan's voice snapped me back to the present. You okay? You looked far away, just remembering. I said, my tone even. Maddie leaned closer, that rehearsed smile back in place. We're just glad you're here. It means a lot. 20 years, I said quietly, letting the number hang in the air. She held her smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Ethan clapped his hands lightly, as if to change the subject. Come on, let's eat. We moved to the table where the seats filled with Maddie's parents, her friends, and a man Ethan introduced as his business partner. No one bothered to explain the business. Dinner was all polished conversation and practiced laughter. Between bites of prime rib, Ethan kept steering the topic toward opportunities, market timing, and investment vehicles. I recognized the language. It was the same tone I'd heard in Robert Weston's voice 2 decades earlier. At one point, Ethan leaned toward me. Dad, after dinner, I want to show you something big project I've been working on. I think you'll like it. Great returns, minimal risk. I gave him the same neutral smile I'd given 100 overeager property flippers in my time. We'll talk. Dessert came and went. The dining room emptied slowly, guests lingering over coffee while Ethan gestured for me to follow him into the den. The den was smaller, more personal, family photos on the mantle, the kids' school portraits, and not a single picture of me. Maddie joined us, closing the door behind her. Ethan sat forward, elbows on his knees. So here's the deal. We're raising capital for this venture, AI tech, cutting-edge stuff. With the right funding, it could triple in value in a year. Maddie's voice slid in like silk. We thought since you've been so successful lately, maybe you'd want to be part of it. There it was. The real invitation, not for Christmas, for capital. I let the silence stretch, watching the flicker of firelight on their eager faces. Then I said, I did bring something for you. Their eyes lit up just as I knew they would. I reached for the leather briefcase at my side, but didn't open it. Not yet. Timing is everything. They could wait. After all, I'd been waiting 20 years. The fire cracked just once, sharp like a knuckle popping, then fell quiet again. In the hush of the den, I could hear the faint clink of cups from the dining room and the low chorus of a Christmas special playing in the background. The house smelled of cinnamon and roasted meat, and something sweeter underneath, like expectation left too long under heat. Ethan's eyes kept bouncing to the leather briefcase by my chair, the way a thirsty man looks at a full glass he isn't sure he's earned. Maddie sat with her ankles crossed and her hands folded, the perfect posture of someone who's practiced looking calm. If you didn't watch her hands closely, You'd miss the small tremor in her thumbs, nerves learning to speak when the mouth won't. I let silence sit with us. I wanted it to pull at them to stretch the surface until something beneath showed through. Go on, Dad, Ethan said, finally leaning forward. The old confident grin, the one he wore at 17 when he wanted the car keys, eased across his face. Let's see the surprise. Funny thing about gifts, I said, resting my palm on the case. The best ones don't look like much from the outside. Maddie's smile sharpened. As long as what's inside is meaningful. Oh, I said it is. I lifted the latches 1, 2, clean metal clicks that sounded too loud in that soft room. I didn't open the lid yet. I watched Ethan. He leaned even closer, pupils widening, breath shallowing. 1,000 little tells he'd never learned to hide because life kept rewarding him before he had to. And for a second, just a narrow one, I saw the boy he'd been kneeling on the driveway with a broken bike chain, lips split from trying to jump the curb like the older kids. I've got you, I told him then, hands sure around the greasy links. He believed me. Back then, belief was cheap and easy. I opened the case. No check, no bow-wrapped envelope, no promise of wire transfers, just a neat stack of cream folders and clear sleeves tabbed labeled calm. Ethan's grin stalled, then thinned. What is this, yours? I said, and slid the first sleeve across the coffee table. Start at the top. He lifted it, still hopeful enough to think maybe it was a contract, something official that would end nicely for him. His eyes flicked down, then widened the way a car's dash lights up when a wire shorts. Chapter 11. He said the words scraping out. This is old. 18 months, I said. Your partner's last company dissolved with a 6F-figure trail. Your signatures are in the appendix. I tapped the corner. Page 8. He didn't turn the page. His jaw did the turning instead, clenching left, then right, counting seconds. Maddie reached for the document, then stopped when I slid the next one forward. Property tax notices. I said, your address March 4th behind. You've got time. Not much. Maddie's forehead creased. You had no right to look at public records. I said, everyone has that right. Most people just don't look. I laid down another. Personal credit utilization across 4 cards. Cash advances totaling $38,000 in the last 9 months. Minimum payments. Deferred pain. Stop, Ethan said. I didn't. I set the 4th sleeve in a clean line with the others, and for a moment just watched him. He looked like Robert in that second, the same thin anger that didn't know where to go when charm failed it. I felt something move in me, but it wasn't satisfaction. It was quieter than that. Something like a confirmed diagnosis. Dreadful, yes, but also a relief to finally name. Why are you doing this? He asked, voice climbing without permission. To humiliate me. On Christmas, I exhaled through my nose slow. You invited me to perform Sunday. I'm showing you what you rehearsed for. Maddie found her voice. This is cruel. You don't know what we've been dealing with. You don't understand the pressure we're under. I understand pressure, I said. I just don't confuse it with permission. The logs shifted in the grate. Sparks rose brief and bright and vanished. I reached into the case again, not for a sleeve this time, but for a plain white envelope with a blue stamp in the corner. I tucked it under my palm and thought about the night in 2002 when Ethan came home late wearing a jacket I couldn't afford, bought with money I didn't have. It's just a jacket, he'd said. I'd stood in the kitchen doorway and stared at him, and he'd stared back at me and waited to see if I had it in me to take it away. I didn't. I wanted him to feel like the boys in the neighborhood whose fathers had done better by their families. I wanted him to fit. I gave him the feeling instead of the truth. That debt came due. Do you remember I said now when you were 16 and you wanted those sneakers that were on back order everywhere? You called 3 stores, hit a wall, threw the phone down, and walked away. He shifted in his chair. I spent the next 5 nights after work calling every outlet between here and Kansas City and drove 6 hours round trip in a snowstorm to pick them up. You opened that box on Christmas morning and didn't even look up. You just put them on and went outside to show your friends. Ethan swallowed, throat working. Why are you telling me this? Because you learned something that day. I said that if you turned your back, I'd run faster to catch up. That if you were silent, I'd fill it. That's on me. I trained you badly. Tonight, I'm retraining both of us. I slid the white envelope across. This one is newer. Ethan didn't touch it at first. Then he pinched the corner and drew it toward him, opened it with his thumb, and read. The blood drained out of his face on a slow, precise schedule, like someone turning down a dimmer switch. Maddie leaned in. What is it? He didn't answer. He handed it to her with fingers that had forgotten how to hold. She read. Her mouth opened, then closed. No, she said. You didn't. I did. I said the bank was tired of your missed calls and phantom promises. I'm a comfortable caller, Ethan. They were happy to sell your mortgage at a discount and get back to their holiday party. You bought our. His voice failed. He tried again. You bought our mortgage? Yes. You can't do that. Someone could. I did. Maddie's composure finally cracked. This is extortion. No, I said softly. This is housekeeping. You had a mess you couldn't manage. I'm offering to manage it. And what Ethan said does your management look like? I pulled a manila folder thinner than the others from the case. Inside were 2 sets of documents, one thick, one elegant. I placed the thick one to my left, the elegant one to my right. This, I said, tapping the left stack, is the long way. Continued delinquency notices, a public foreclosure process, a sheriff's sale, moving trucks, neighbors who read the paper. You'll be solvent again by the time Ava is in college and Jake is telling his therapist why Christmas makes him nauseous. Silence. The fire breathed in and out. The dining room laughter took a breath with it. And this, I said, tapping the right stack, is the short way. Deed and lie. You sign. I file. You walk away without a foreclosure on your record. I assume the debt. You find a rental you can afford on a street where your kids won't have to answer questions at the bus stop. That's not a gift, Maddie said. It is to them, I said, tilting my head toward the hallway where the outline of Ava's shoulder was visible just beyond the den's slightly open door. Kids learn more from doors that aren't shut than from the ones that slam. Ethan pressed the heels of his palms into his eyes, then let them fall. Why? He said, small now, like the boy with the broken chain. Why are you doing this to us? To you? I asked. I'm doing this for me. Revenge, he said. Clarity, I corrected. Revenge is loud. This is quiet. Maddie straightened in her chair, gathering whatever dignity she could salvage. We can fight this. You can, I said. You'll lose time. You'll spend money you don't have on lawyers who will rightly tell you to sign the short stack. Or you can sign it tonight while the roast is still warm and tell your guest you had a small flood in the basement and everything's fine. Her eyes flashed. You set this up to humiliate us. I set this up to stop myself from being humiliated again. I said there's a difference. Ethan looked at the papers like they might rearrange themselves into something better if he stared long enough. What do you want, Dad? The word came out like it hurt him to say it. Tell me what you want. I took a breath and let it go. Distance, I said. That's all. Sign, and I won't pursue back-owed property taxes. I won't call your investors. I won't speak to your in-laws about the loan you told them you needed for equipment that never existed. I will not show up at your door again. In return, you will not call me when you hear a rumor about me doing well. You will not send messages through people we both know. You will not use the word family like a crowbar. He flinched, and I said, you will tell your children the truth about me. Not the sainted version you use when you need something. Not the villain version that made you feel better when you left. The truth. Their grandfather is a decent man who made mistakes, who loved his son more than his son loved him back. That's all I'm asking for. The deed and the truth. A log sighed and collapsed in the fireplace. A tiny avalanche of ember and ash. In the doorway, Ava shifted. I didn't turn. I didn't want to make her part of the stage. It was enough to know she was there. We can't just move, Maddie said, but softer now. The fight loosening its grip on her throat. The kids, their school. Then act now, I said. Don't wait for the public version. Choose the smaller pain while you still can. The minutes that followed had a weight to them you could count if you wanted. Ethan's breaths were long, then short, then regular again. Maddie's knee kept time under the coffee table. I kept my hands folded on top of the briefcase, still as the mantel clock. I remembered a different clock, the cheap plastic one in my rental after the divorce. The second hand jerking forward with a sound too loud for such a small room. How many nights I'd sat looking at the door, imagining Ethan walking through it. How many mornings I'd told myself not to look again. You can forgive people for not loving you. It's harder to forgive yourself for loving them badly. Ethan reached for a pen. Wait, Maddie said, grabbing his wrist. We should talk to someone. A lawyer. You can, I said, tomorrow. But this paper is dated tonight because I want what I'm giving you to be a Christmas gift, not a New Year's resolution. If a lawyer tells you to sign something else, I'll listen. If a lawyer tells you this is unfair, I'll adjust. I'm not here to trick you. I'm here to finish something. Maddie looked at me for a long time like she was trying to see where the trap was. I didn't move. There wasn't one. All the traps we'd set for each other were 20 years old already. Why Deed and Lou? Ethan asked, voice steadying slightly, bargaining reflex kicking in. Why not just let us refinance? You've tried, I said. Your broker called a week ago using a different number. He forgot people still pick up landlines. I shifted, reached into the case again, and slid out a single-page printout, a transcript of a voicemail from a mortgage officer. Debt-to-income ratio, utilization, late payments. The alphabet soup says no. He read it and winced like the words had edges. And why tonight? Maddie said, a little defiance creeping back. Why not wait till after the holidays if you're so merciful? Because you asked me to come tonight, I said. And because I remember every Christmas I spent alone, thinking maybe I would hear from you, and how the day stretched like cheap taffy until it snapped. I wanted this day to end honestly for me for once. I slid the elegant stack closer, placed a pen on top, and waited. From the dining room, the muffled chatter shifted a new voice, joining a door opening, then closing. The kids or someone arriving late. It didn't matter. The den had shrunk to 3 people and a decision. Ethan took the pen. He held it like it might mark him back. He looked at me. For a second, the bravado drained, and something unarmored showed through confusion, maybe, or grief you only let yourself feel when you're not sure the room is real. He pressed the tip to the paper and signed his name. Maddie didn't move. He nudged the page toward her. Maddie, he said, pleading just a hair. She stared at me. You're enjoying this, she said. No, I said. I'm surviving it, she signed. I lifted the signed pages, slid them into the folder, and closed it carefully, like tucking a photograph back into an album. The room felt bigger again, like the walls had moved an inch away from us. Thank you, I said. I meant it. Not for giving me what I wanted, for ending a sentence we'd all been trapped inside. What now? Ethan asked, voice small again. Now, I said, you go back to your guests. You know, I told them there was a small family issue that I had to take care of, and it was all settled now. I ate my prime rib. I let the kids open their presents. Tomorrow, I will start looking for new apartments. I will have my attorney call yours on Monday. We will make sure this whole transition is as clean as it can be. And you? He asked. What do you do? I put the folder away, I said. And I go home. He nodded once, then twice, because nodding was something his body could do while his mind was still trying to catch up. He stood up, then sat down again, then finally stood up for real. Greta did not move. Her eyes had turned all hard and shiny, the way old snow looks after a day in the sun and another freezing night. At the door, I stopped. I did not do it for show, but because there was one last thing, and I had to decide if I was going to say it. I turned back. Werner, I said. He looked up. There are other envelopes in that case. They are not for you. They are for me. They are letters I wrote and never sent. For birthdays, for graduations, for Wednesdays when I just missed you. I kept them because I needed proof that I had tried, even when no one else could see it. I am going to burn them when I get back home. That is my part of this. He blinked like something had flown into his eye. Dad, he said, and then just stopped. The word felt like a strange coin in his mouth, heavy, hard to spend. I know, I said. Me too. When I opened the den door, the heat and noise from the dining room just rolled out. Laughter bounced off glasses and plates. I stepped into it and felt like a man stepping out of an old photograph and into the real world. Charlotte was standing right outside the door, her hands wrapped around a glass of water like it might run away. She moved to the side, and our eyes met for a second. Hers were curious, not mean, and I gave her a nod. She nodded back, just a small, serious dip of her chin, the kind only kids can do without looking foolish. Everything all right? A woman at the table asked brightly as I went by. I think it was Greta's mother, going by the way her mouth looked. Everything is fine, I said. It was not kindness. It was just the truth. Fine does not mean easy. It just means that it is finished. I took my coat from the closet and could smell the cedar on the wool. Werner did not follow me to the door. Greta did not call my name. Nobody asked if I wanted coffee. It was perfect. It meant the show was over, and we were back to the real weather again. Outside, the night was sharper. Snow drifted down in a slow, careful fall, each flake taking its time to pick its spot. My breath bloomed and then disappeared. I stood on the porch for a minute, watching the yellow squares of their windows. Each one a small stage where some version of a family was still being played out. I felt no need to pull the curtain down. I had done what I came here to do. At the curb, my car sat under a clean cap of snow. I wiped it off with my sleeve, started the engine, and waited for the heater to give in and try anyway. The radio came alive in the middle of a song, Silent Night, Holy Night, and I almost laughed. Not at them, but at how you sometimes get the exact song you need, whether you pick the station or not. Before I put the car in gear, I took the folder from the passenger seat and put it on my lap. I opened it, slid the signed deed in lieu to the top, and let my fingers rest on the paper. You could feel the pressure of the pen marks through the page, the little dents where they had pressed too hard on certain letters, the human part of a document that machines would scan and file. Proof that they had made a choice, and proof that I had, too. In the rearview mirror, the house got softer, then blurred as the windshield fogged up. I wiped a clean circle with my glove and looked one more time. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw Werner at the window, a dark shape behind the glass. Then the shape moved, and it was just the Christmas tree. I put the car in drive. At the end of the block, I stopped at the stop sign. Left would take me to the highway and back to my home in 30 minutes. Right would take me past the hospital where I had spent a night alone a few years back, listening to a monitor keep me tied to the present. I went right, not for a place, but for the drive, for the clean, empty stretch of road where the only thing I could hear was the tires hissing on the new snow. What people never tell you about revenge is that it does not fill you up. Not really. It just stops the leak. The rest you have to build yourself. Halfway down Elm Street, a new thought popped into my head, steady and not a surprise. This was only the first cut of the rope. There were other knots, some in my hands, some in theirs, and at least one of them was tied by someone who was not in that house tonight. At a red light, I came to a stop and felt the engines hum through the steering wheel. The folder was sitting on the seat beside me, breathing along with the heater. In my head, I could already hear part 4 beginning. The part where being useful to people who have already spent you becomes a bad deal, and where justice stops being an idea and starts sending certified mail. The light changed. I drove on into a city that felt clean under its white blanket, into a night that felt like it would be long and honest, into the rest of the plan that had been waiting, patient as snow, for 30 years. I did not go home. I turned right at the light and kept going until the glow of the hospital was behind me and the fluorescent buzz of a strip mall took its place. The local pack and ship place was still open, with Christmas Eve hours posted in a wrinkly plastic sheet on the door. Inside, the air smelled like toner and cardboard and hard work. "Can I help you?" the clerk asked, a kid in a red beanie with tape stuck to his sleeve. "I have 7 things," I said, lifting the document carrier onto the counter. "Certified, with a return receipt." He slid over the green cards without even looking at the names. I wrote them out slowly, in block letters, the way you do when you want to be sure the world cannot pretend it could not read you later. Werner Albrecht and Greta Albrecht, courtesy copies. Warwick County Recorder, deed in lieu recording packet, and a cover letter from my attorney. Lakeside Bank, loss mitigation assignment confirmation. Financial Regulation Authority, complaint exhibits a through F. Attorney Marlene Schmidt, a friend who knows how to make a clean line through a mess. Frank Bauer, an investor who joked in his email signature that he was previously burned, though nothing about him felt like a joke. Providence Journal Business Desk, attention Clara Schneider, the only reporter in town who would still call sources back after 5 p.m. The clerk stamped each return card. Punch, 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 like a tiny hammer hitting a softer bench. He slid the receipts back to me. "Do you want these to go today?" "They need to start moving," I said. "Tonight is fine." He smiled, tired, but nice. "Merry Christmas." "Something like that," I said. Back in the car, I set the 7 receipts in a neat row on the passenger seat. That was a small thing you learn over time. Make a line where you can. Even a line of paper is more steady than a pile. The heater sighed. Outside, snow drifted sideways in slow, thoughtful lines, like it respected the work of falling. I thought about the last thing I had told Werner, that I would burn the letters I had written and never sent. I meant it, but not yet. There were still a couple of knots in the rope. My phone buzzed, a stubborn, insistent hum against the console. "Marlene Schmidt, tell me you did not sign anything without me," she said as a way of saying hello. The voice of a woman who had pulled more than one good man out of his bad temper. "I did better," I said. "I had them sign." A pause. "You got the deed?" "It is in my lap," I said. It is clean. They will have a lawyer tomorrow. I told them I would adjust if their lawyer flagged anything that was unfair. That is why I still return your calls, she said. You do sharp things without doing dirty ones. She let out a breath. All right. I will have the recorder packet on my desk at 9 a.m. Your certification should be here Monday, holiday hours allowing. I will file the electronic notice first thing so that a clock is running. And the bureau? I asked. I read your draft, she said. It is not a vendetta, it is a pattern. Unregistered requests for money, promissory notes that are dressed up as friends and family bridge funds, investor money mixed with personal expenses, restaurants with a comma in the price, weekend conferences in Las Vegas. The exhibits tell it without you saying a word. She paused. Are you sure you want to put your name on it? You could file anonymously. I spent 30 years being a ghost, I said. Not anymore. She was quiet in a way that means approval. Expect a call after the holidays. They are not fast, but they are thorough. In the meantime, Frank emailed. He is ready. Patch him in, I said. A click, then another voice. Warm and rough. Frank Bauer. You were right about the boy, he said. I did not want to believe it. No one wants to think they got played by a kid with bright teeth and big words, but we did. Some of us needed to hear it from someone who was not trying to sell us the rest of the story. You will not hear me brag about it, I said. Good, he said. I do not like people who enjoy themselves too much right before a court date. Papers shuffled on his end. I have two others, Helen and Raj, who are willing to go on record with their losses. We will file civil first. If the Bureau decides to take a swing later, they take it. Serve after Christmas, Marlene said. I do not love process servers and Santa hats. I have a guy who wears sneakers to everything, Frank said. He will knock on the 27th. As friendly as a Sunday usher. The papers will not be. We said the things people say when a plan is ready to walk without us for a while. Be safe. I will confirm. Talk soon. And I hung up. The car was just sitting there. The wipers were ticking at a low speed. I could feel the old need in my fingers, the one that wants to tighten a bolt that is already tight. You have to stop yourself, or you will strip the threads. I drove. The hospital rose out of the snow ahead like a ship, its lights soft behind the glass. Automatic doors breathed in families and let them back out again. I parked on level 3, my spot from the year they slipped a wire through my artery and patched a narrow spot I had been pretending not to feel. Back then, I lay under a ceiling tile with a hairline crack and tried to decide who I would want at my bedside if I were someone else. I settled on the nurse who held my wrist and told me my pulse was stubborn. I liked that about myself. The chapel off the lobby was empty as usual. It was not a church I went to, but it was a room that understood how quiet works. I sat in the back row and listened to the building hum, the low sound of a machine keeping someone awake on a floor above me. I thought about the boy with the bike chain, the teenager with the new jacket, the man tonight holding a pen like it might bite him. I thought about the first time his voicemail said, "Mailbox full," and how I kept leaving messages anyway because I did not want a machine to think I had given up. I took the bundle of old letters from my coat pocket. The rubber-banded edges were soft from years of being carried from one drawer to another whenever I reorganized my hope. I slid one free and read 3 lines I already knew by heart. Your birthday is next week. I found a book with maps of cities you have never been to. I do not know why, but it felt right to buy it anyway. I put the letter back. Not yet, I whispered. Soon. On my way out, a volunteer was pushing a cart of small wrapped gifts toward the elevator, things for the kids' ward. Stuffed animals, coloring books, crayons, and boxes that had not yet learned what it is to break. She smiled at me, the smile of someone who has chosen her shift instead of just having to work it. Are you with someone tonight? She asked. Yes, I said. Me. Her smile got bigger. Good company. Back in the car, I took a left at the first light and headed toward North 51st. The shopping center there looked like every other one in America. Big boxes with big signs pretending they were smaller. But tucked between a flooring outlet and a store that sold 4 kinds of massage chairs was a glass door with a brass plaque, Fielding and Comb Property Management. The door was not locked. The receptionist looked up as I stepped in. We are closing at 7 o'clock, she said. You just made it. I am not here for a tour, I said. I am here for a key. She blinked, then looked at the sticky note on her screen. Oh, the trust pickup. Just a moment. She disappeared into the back and came back with a small, plain envelope and a laminated tag. Unit 4B, Riverbend Townhomes. Underneath, in clean block print, it said, Tenant Albrecht, pending contact on file. The manager asked me to remind you, she said as I signed. It is a short-term furnished rental, 6 months, extendable month to month after that. Utilities are included. The kids like the courtyard. They are not my kids, I said, and the surprise on her face made me hear how hard that sounded. I mean they are. They are just not mine in a way that would make that sentence easy. She nodded like people do when they cannot possibly know what you mean, but they want you to feel like you made sense anyway. Merry Christmas, she said. I tucked the envelope into my coat. The trust that rented 4B had my money, but not my name. If Werner signed tomorrow and acted like a man, he would never know I had left a soft landing for his children. If he did not, the property manager would call Greta directly with instructions. No mention of me. Mercy works best when it is clean. As I stepped back into the cold, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. The kind of number you answer when your life is made of a few people and a lot of moving parts. August Brooks, a woman's voice said. It was sharp, professional, and curious. This is Clara Schneider from the Journal. I got a packet tonight with your name on the cover and a story inside it. That was fast, I said. I live near the sorting facility, she said, half laughing. It is an old habit. I check my mailbox on holidays. It keeps me from thinking the quiet means the world has stopped. We could use more of that, I said. I do not run hit jobs on family, she said, with no nonsense in her voice. I run patterns. You understand the difference. I do. And you are comfortable being named? I am comfortable being precise, I said. If you cannot be that, do not write it. I can be, she said. But I will not be fast. Call me old-fashioned. I prefer to let the first wave of denial crash where it is going to crash, then see what is left on the sand. Monday, I said, after the holiday. Happy in-betweens, she said, and hung up. It was after 7 o'clock now, the kind of hour when families were clearing plates or arguing over the last clean fork or calling the one aunt who always insists on a video chat. I sat in the car and looked at the key to 4B. I pictured Charlotte's serious nod in the den doorway. I pictured Leo barely looking up from his screen and silently hoped he would get stuck on a video about how to be a decent man and let the algorithm do something good for once. My phone lit up again, this time with a name I expected never to see again. Alara. I let it ring twice and then answered. August, she said, and even in that one word, I could hear the versions of me she had tried on in her head before picking one that fit the story she was telling herself tonight. Werner called. I figured. He says you bought the mortgage. That you humiliated them. I bought a debt, I said. I offered a cleaner way out. They chose it. You always were good with practical things. And you always were good with making up stories. I kept my voice even. You told me once he needed a winner for a father. You got your wish. Just not the kind you had in mind. She ignored that. They have kids, August. I noticed, I said. I did something they will feel, not see. That is all you need to know. You could have called me, she said. Why? I asked. So you could tell me to be reasonable while he asked me for a check? We lived that scene when he was 19. Silence, then softer. He was a boy. He is not anymore. And you? She said. What are you now? Finished, I said, and let the words sit long enough for both of us to look at them. She let out a breath that was not quite a laugh. Hans always said you would make a good enemy if you ever stopped being so polite. Tell Hans I am late to the job, but punctual now, I said. And tell him he taught me more than he meant to. That some men mistake being early for being right. Happy Christmas, August, she said, which was either brave or cruel, and probably both. Peace, I said, because some words still mattered to me, and hung up. I put the car in drive and let the city flow past. The old neighborhoods with their short, wide bungalows, the newer rows of townhomes with names that sounded like perfumes, the gas stations with wreaths taped to bulletproof glass, the quiet that sits on a place when it is done trying for the night. Back home, I carried the folder and the envelope upstairs and set them on the table where my life happens. A cheap lamp, a mug with a crack, a book with a library stamp that says, I should have returned it last week. I took off my coat and draped it over the back of the chair the way men who live alone do. And then I stood there with my hands on the table and let the after of the night catch up. There was one more thing to do. I pulled my old laptop toward me and opened the email I had written weeks ago and set on a delay, the one I had titled After, because that is where it was meant to belong. To the 3 private investors whose names I had found on a business filing. To the venture fund that had written Werner a polite but pointed letter 20 months back asking where their prototype went. To the state attorney's intake desk, the kind that replies with a case number and not much else until they are ready to move. The attachments were the same ones I had slid across the coffee table tonight, plus things I had not needed to show my son. Screenshots of a Slack channel called Founders Only, where bridge money was talked about like it meant free. A sales pitch that promised guaranteed returns if you read it fast and forgot how English works. A picture of a leased Mercedes with a caption about manifesting. I read the email one more time. It was not angry. It was an outline. The kind of letter a man writes when he is done trying to convince anyone of anything and has decided to just put the facts where facts belong and let them sit there until gravity does the rest. I hit send. The whoosh was soft and clean. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and put it on the burner. Tea, because I knew if I poured whiskey, I would like it too much tonight. While the water warmed up, I took the rubber-banded packet of letters from my coat pocket and set them on the counter. I untied the band. They fanned out with the tired grace of things that have waited too long. Later, I told them again and put them back in the pocket. Mercy, too, works best when it is clean. I carried my mug to the window and stood looking out at the birch tree in the yard, its branches holding the night like it was something they could cradle without breaking. I thought of Werner's signature pressing a shallow dent into the page, of Greta's eyes when she decided that pride was not a plan, of Charlotte's small nod in the doorway. I thought of the boy in the driveway and the father with his hands full of chain and grease and love. And I let myself feel both of them at the same time. The phone buzzed one last time. A text, not a call. It was an unknown number. For words. Thank you for 4B. I just stared. The number was not Werner's. It was not Greta's. It was not anyone I knew. I typed, "Who is this?" A pause, then a friend. Please do not stop being the kind of man who does the thing no one sees. I set the phone down. Some knots you do not untie. You just stop pulling. The clock on the wall clicked over to 10 o'clock. Somewhere, the last of the fireworks people saved for Christmas, even though they make no sense on snow, lit the sky for a second and then were gone. I turned off the lamp, and the house settled around me like a coat that finally fit again. Tomorrow would bring the slow work, the calls, the filings, the sudden awkward politeness of people who used to ignore me and now had to decide if I was a bad guy or an inconvenient fact. It would bring a process server and sneakers, a lawyer who would explain to my son what he had signed, a property manager who would meet Greta with a key to a place with clean sheets and a courtyard. And it would bring quiet, the good kind. I rinsed the mug, turned off the kitchen light, and went to the door. Before I killed the porch lamp, I opened it and let the cold roll in over my socks and the smell of snow find my throat. Peace, I said again, to no one and to everything. Then I closed the door on Christmas Eve and walked toward the bed I had made for myself and the morning that would ask me, as it always does, what kind of man I was going to be next. Christmas morning came like a breath that had finally been let go. I woke up before the light, out of habit, not excitement, and sat at the kitchen table with the same cracked mug, steam fogging up the window, where the maple's bare branches etched their skinny handwriting against a white sky. The folder from last night was sitting there, closed beside the phone. I did not touch either one. Some things are more true if you just let them sit. By 8 o'clock, the neighborhood had started moving. One car backed out slowly, carefully over the packed snow. A father dragged a trash bag full of gift wrap to the curb. Somewhere, a radio was leaning too hard on old holiday songs. I finished my coffee, washed the cup, and set it upside down on the rack. Small jobs you can finish are good company on days that are built for waiting. At 9:17, the phone buzzed. Frank Bauer. All right, we are off. Sneakers, no Santa hat. Expect a knock on the 27th before lunch. I typed back. Thanks, Frank. Easy does it. He replied with a thumbs up. Frank's way of being brief was something I respected. He did not spend words he did not have to. 10 minutes later, Marlene's name slid up the screen. The recorder's online intake is live, she said. I have put the deed in lieu packet at the top of my pile for the 28th, but I will file the electronic notice today. The clock starts now. Thank you, I said. And August breathed. You do not need to call anyone today. Let the paper travel. I will, I said. I am. You say that like a man practicing it. I am. I repeated, and she laughed softly. Merry Christmas, she said. Peace. I answered, because that is the word I had chosen for myself this year. I did not have to imagine what Werner's morning looked like. I had seen enough kitchens to know the routine. Greta at the island with a mug she never drank from. Werner's phone face down on the counter. Then face up again. Kids moving around the edges, trying to figure out the mood. The first crack in a dam is not visible until it is. When it shows all at once. At 11:45, a number I did not have saved called, then called again. I let it go to voicemail. The message arrived before the notification sound was finished. Dad, it is me. Something is wrong with the bank. Call me. I set the phone face down and watched the December light pool on the table. In the long years of quiet, I had learned the difference between being needed and being used. Both make a sound. Only one will follow you into the room where you are trying to sleep. By noon, Clara Schneider had posted the first part of her story. She kept her word. There was no huge, angry headline, just a spine of facts with carefully placed ribs, dates, filings, and quotes from complaints that had not yet been answered. Local entrepreneur faces questions over investor funds. There was a photo of Werner at some ribbon-cutting ceremony, his head turned toward a camera he loved more than it loved him. The article did not say guilty. It did not have to. It asked the kind of questions men like Werner hate, the ones with answers that are too simple to be lies. The phone buzzed again. Unknown. I let it ring. Another voicemail. Mr. Brooks, this is Helen Wagner. I believe you have spoken with Frank. I wanted to say thank you for putting your name on this. Most people will not. A pause, a breath. We will be in touch after the holiday. I listened to it twice, not for the words, but for the tone. Determination wears a different coat than anger. Hers fit. I stepped outside for a walk. The snow had a hard crust on top from the night, and my boots made a clean, satisfying sound. I passed the house with the lopsided reindeer, and the one with way too many lights, and the one with none at all. A single wreath hung at an angle. I fought the urge to fix it. A boy on a sled lost his balance and fell into the yard, laughing. His father laughed with him. It was good to hear. You do not have to be part of a thing to be warmed by it. Back home, I made tea. I was learning to like it better than whiskey on certain nights and most mornings. The kettle sang a thin, serious song. At 3:30, Greta called. She did not start with hello. You could not help yourself, she said, her voice a thin wire. You had to make it public. I mailed facts, I said. Clara wrote them down. You could have handled this like a grown-up, in private. I did for 30 years. It did not work. Her breath hit the phone like cold air on a window. The kids are here. I know, I said. That is why I left you 4B. Silence. What is 4B? You will find out, I said. If you need it. We do not need your charity. It is not charity, I said. It is a door that opens. What you do with a door is up to you. You think this makes you a hero? She snapped. No, I said. It makes me finished. She tried another approach. Werner is your son. He was, I said. He is a man now. He can make a man's phone calls. She hung up. I set the phone back on the table and watched the steam from my mug unwind and disappear. By late afternoon, the texts started to arrive from numbers I did not know. Is this the same Brooks named in the piece on the ledger? We invested through a buddy. Can we talk? Do you think a restitution plan is possible? I did not reply to any of them. Marlene had told me to just let the papers do their own work. I would. A plan is only good if you trust it after you set it down. Evening came early. It always does in December, but that night felt more intentional, like the sun understood I had seen enough. I turned off the lamp and let the living room be just a room again instead of a stage. The house has a way of settling differently after you have made a decision and followed through on it. At 7:45, a new message, unknown. We should talk. I did not have to ask who it was. I typed back one word, tomorrow. You can unlearn answering on the first ring. It just takes a lot of years of practice. December 27th began with the color of a bruise and the promise of snow that could not make up its mind. I put on the coffee, then turned it off and boiled water for tea instead. Somewhere between part 4 and this morning, I had walked across an invisible line. It was not a huge one, just the difference between doing a difficult thing and being the man who had done it. The second one is quieter. The second one lets you hear your own pulse without flinching. At 10:15, Frank again. First service complete. The sneakers did their job. He opened the door, tried to make small talk, then read the line on the paper, and decided he did not like my guy. I cannot imagine why. Any trouble? Only the usual people who think a closed door is a legal defense. The other two are on schedule. You will get the proofs later. Thank you, I said. Two words that mean something different every time you say them. He knew which ones these were. At 11 o'clock, the number I had answered my entire life called again. Dad. Yes, Werner. I read the article. I figured. It is misleading. It is accurate. He breathed in, then out, trying to decide what kind of voice would work on me now. Will you meet me? He asked, his voice getting softer, closer to what I remembered from the years I still led into the room. Today, please. Here, I said. 12 o'clock. Come alone. I hung up before he could try to call my bluff. Mercy has a better aim when you let it arrive without all the drama. The hour between the call and the knock moved strangely, like a second hand catching on a piece of wood. I straightened a pile of mail I had no intention of opening. I wiped down a clean counter. I thought about the old letters and then left them in my coat pocket. Some props are better when the audience never sees them. At 12:05, the knock came. Werner stood in the doorway with the posture of a man who had practiced not looking small. He had failed. His eyes looked like they had not slept, and his jaw had been shaved in a hurry. I could see the boy under the beard more clearly than I ever had when he was young. Come in, I said, stepping to the side. Shoes off. He did what I said without arguing. It was a small win, and not the kind that fills you. He followed me to the kitchen. I gestured to the chair across from mine. We sat down. The table between us was a more honest witness than the last one we had shared. You ambushed me, he said. That is not hello. That is not family. I set a clock, I said. You did not read it. This is everything I have, he said. He held his hands out, palms up, like a guy trying to prove he had nothing to hide. My family, my kids. Yes, I said. And my name, my quiet, my 30 years. He swallowed. I called you because I wanted money, I said. And a story. You wanted the old man to feel needed and write a check that would replace the silence with gratitude, and nothing else. That is not fair. It is accurate, I said, the same word I had used with Clara in my head and with Greta out loud. He leaned in. I pitched a deal. I thought you would want to be part of something big. I thought after everything you would want. He did not finish. Want is a verb that does not like things that cannot easily move. I let him try again. You could have come to me, he said. You could have told me you had concerns. I did, I said. On Christmas, with paper you refused to touch until the last piece broke the skin. His mouth went flat. You humiliated me in my own house. That room does not belong to you, I said. If it did, the bank would not have taken my call. He looked like he had been slapped. Then he straightened up. You think buying our mortgage makes you a hero? No, I said. It made me precise. The hero part was leaving a key you do not know about yet. His eyes moved up. What key? Not yours, I said. Your children's, if they need it. I do not want your. It is not for you to want, I said. That is the point. He stared at me. In the past, this is where I would have filled the air for him, smoothed it over, giving him a soft sentence to land on. I waited instead. The kettle on the stove clicked as it cooled. Somewhere down the block, a snow shovel met concrete with a clean scrape. After a full minute, he spoke. What do you want me to do? The question was real. A door, I said. A real one, not the kind we talk about in inspirational emails, the kind with a knob and a hinge and a weight. Tell the truth. To yourself first, then to your wife, then to your investors, which I suspect is the part you meant to skip. And tell your children the truth about me. Not the version that makes me a wallet with a face. The version where I am a man who loved you when loving you was easy and when it was not, and who stopped letting you spend him. He rubbed his eyes with his thumb and ring finger like he was trying to erase something that was written there. And if I do that, you will what? Call off the dogs? I did not unleash dogs, I said. I mailed facts. They have their own teeth. He let out something between a laugh and a sound you make when you stand up too quickly. I cannot fix this. You can begin, I said. You can clean your side of the street. It is messy. So is everyone's. He folded, then unfolded his arms. Greta is furious. I do not doubt it. She says you did this to punish us. I did this to stop being punished, I said. There is a difference. He sat back, looked at the ceiling, then at the fridge, then at his hands, as if any of them had a better answer. Investors will sue, he said finally. We will lose the house. You will not, I said. You already signed it over to someone who will not embarrass your kids at the bus stop. Why? He asked, and it was genuine this time. Not the kind of why that demands a reason to fight, but the kind that wonders if it has any right to an answer. Because I know what it is to sit in a kitchen and not know where you are sleeping next month, I said. Because Charlotte nodded at me in a doorway on Christmas. Because Leo did not look up. And that is a kind of mercy, too. His mouth quivered, then steadied. You talk to Mom. She called me. We said old words to new people, I said. Neither of us is better for it. He smiled at that despite himself, a thin, tired curve. She thinks you are dangerous now. I think I am accurate now, I said. The danger is a story other people tell, so they do not have to change. He nodded, a small movement that looked like it cost him. What is next? Monday, your lawyer calls mine. Tuesday, the recorder logs the deed. The bureau will move when they move. The paper will write when it writes. Your job is to answer the phone you used to ignore, even when the person on the other end has nothing you want. He stood up, sat down, then stood again. He had been a moving target his entire life. Stillness was the new work. Dad? He said, and the words sounded like it did when he was 9 and could not get the zipper of his coat to catch. He looked like he might try for another sentence. He did not. Thank you, he said instead, and then laughed, a short laugh with no humor. That is the wrong thing to say. It is the right one, I said, just not for the reason you mean. We walked to the door. He put his shoes on slowly. At the threshold, he turned. Are you? Will you? Will we ever? You can call, I said. Not for money, not for a story. For the weather. For a book you think I would like. For the name of a good mechanic. I have one. He is honest, which is rarer than you think. He nodded again, then left. I closed the door and leaned my head against it. Not because I was tired, though I was, but because wood that has held a house up for a long time deserves respect. The phone buzzed immediately. Unknown. A text. We are at Fielding. They say there is a key. I stared at it. Then another message. Unit 4B. It is clean. There is a tree outside the window. A third one. Thank you. No name. It did not need one. I walked back to the kitchen and picked up the mug I had left by the kettle. It was cold now. I ran water, rinsed it, and set it upside down again. Another small job finished. Across the street, a neighbor, Al, came out with a snow shovel in one hand and a Tupperware in the other. Beef stew. He did not say he had read anything. He just set the warm plastic on my counter and said, we had extra. The way decent people do when they want to give you something without turning you into a story. I thanked him, and we talked about salt mixtures and whether the city would get to our block before Friday. We shook hands at the door like men agreeing to shovel again tomorrow. The second knock was not a knock. It was an engine that sat too long at my curb and then stopped. I did not need to look. I knew the posture of that quiet. I opened the door before he raised his hand. Werner stood there, his cap low, his collar up. Not angry, not yet. He was just worn out. He looked like a man who had tried on 6 different expressions in the car, and none of them fit. Can I come in? He asked. You already are, I said, and moved aside. He took his shoes off without being told. Progress. He followed me into the kitchen and did not sit down until I told him to. He put his hands flat on the table, as if to show the room they were empty. I did what you said, he began. And the words landed strangely, like he had lifted a weight he did not know how to carry yet. I called Frank. I called Ms. Martinez. I apologized. The last syllable worked hard to come out of his mouth. And I asked. They were civil, he said. In that way people are when they are deciding whether you deserve mercy or the full weight of what is coming. He rubbed the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger. They want a full accounting, bank statements, credit card records, the sales pitch I used, receipts. That is reasonable, I said. It is humiliating. It is honest, I said. You can hate it and still do it. He flinched, not at the words, but at the reflection in them. Greta is packing boxes, he said, and his voice softened without asking for anything. We told the kids we are downsizing. He laughed once, a short bark with no dog behind it. She was furious at you for 4B until she saw the windows. She has been to the unit. I asked her about it yesterday. He said, she told the property manager. I did not know about it until later. She said the carpet does not feel cheap. The beds are made. There is a tree outside the back bedroom. He swallowed. She said it will do. That is Greta's way of saying thank you. I nodded. Mercy does not need applause to work. We cannot afford movers, he said, and said it like a confession. I will rent a truck. He looked at me and then looked away again. I am not asking for help. I know, I said. I also know a kid down the block who will lift for cash. He is saving up for a trade school. I will pay him if you will not. I held his eyes until he had to decide whether pride paid better than relief. He nodded, a tiny movement, the way men do when they are remembering new muscles. He leaned back and let out a breath. I talked to a lawyer, he said, shifting into the tone that made him sound like the version of himself he liked. She thinks we can petition to unfreeze the brokerage, make a case that living expenses should not be held hostage. She says if we show a good faith accounting and a restitution plan, they will work with us. Listen to her, I said. Good lawyers are expensive because regret costs more. He smiled at that, tired and true. She asked me why anyone would sell a mortgage like that at a discount, he added. I told her because someone polite asked. We had reached the edge of what he was ready to say without help. I slid a folder across the table, thinner than the others. No tabs, no labels. He left his hands on the table a second longer than he needed to, then took them. What is this? An exit that does not ruin you completely, I said. It is not easy. It is honest. There is a difference. He opened it. The first page was a letter I had written at 3 o'clock in the morning months ago, then rewritten at 6 o'clock when the coffee made my heart too loud. It was titled Restitution and Repair. Underneath, the points were written cleanly. Full accounting by February 28th. No new businesses, paid employment only for 12 months. Apology letters written by you, not your lawyer, to each investor with specifics. Monthly restitution scheduled at a rate you can stand up under, not one you can brag about and then break. Therapy with someone who is not impressed by you. A signed statement to the Bureau admitting what happened without blaming market shifts, team turnover, or timing. He scanned the list, then stopped. A cap on criminal referrals in exchange for compliance. Can you even? It is a proposal, I said. Not a bribe. Frank is a reasonable man. Helen is too. Raj will follow if the plan is clean and your follow-through is boring. The Bureau will do what it does. But victims who see a man working at a hardware store at 7 a.m. to send them real money by the 5th of the month are more likely to accept checks than a perp walk. His mouth twitched at the mention of the hardware store. My son's hands had held steering wheels and microphones more than wrenches. I let the image sit. And if I do not sign this? He asked, the old defiance showing up for one last lap. Then the paper keeps walking, I said. And you will learn what it feels like when a town that used to nod at you in coffee shops starts remembering they have other places to be. I tapped the folder. I am not bargaining for you. I am putting a path on the table. You can take it. You can lose it. I will be the same man either way. He stared at the final page, which had signature lines with dates. The room breathed with us. Somewhere outside, a delivery truck hissed to a stop and then started again. The world is rude enough to keep moving while you try to be better. He closed the folder and set it on his lap like a weight he could not yet carry or put down. You know what? Werner said, I need to go talk to Greta. You do, I agreed. And then you need to stop talking and start doing. Talking is a business model you've already used up. He just nodded. When he got up, he stopped in the hallway. Dad, he said, and then just swallowed the rest of the sentence. I'll call you tonight. Not for money. For the weather. It's fine, I said, and that made him smile, just for a second. It was a man remembering he has a father, even if he doesn't know what to do with him. He left. The door shut. The house went back to being a house. I didn't get the call that night. I didn't expect to. Men who are trying to decide if they want to stay boys take longer to make a phone call. Instead, I got Clara Schneider. Can I quote you? She asked, getting right to the point. She does that, you know? It's how she teaches sources to trust her. Depends, I said, on whether you're asking me for a feeling or a sentence. Sentences, she said. The town is curious how a father whose son ignored him for 30 years can be both the man who files a deed and the man who pays for a rental with a tree outside the window. I'm tired of people seeing me as either one or the other, I said. I'm both. If you're going to print me true. She waited, and in that wait, I understood what she wanted. It was the line other men would take and use when they wanted to sound like they had learned something without doing it. Fine, I said. Write this. I won't pay for the lie that broke us. I will pay for the truth that just might keep the kids from breaking too. She breathed in. That's clean, she said. It'll make men on the internet mad. Let them be mad, I said. They can go outside and shovel. It helps. We hung up. I ate Al's stew standing over the sink, the way men who have lost their wives do, even if they never had the word for it. The carrots were soft. The beef had been patient. The next morning, the first friend left him. I didn't see it happen. I felt it through the rope, the way climbers feel someone slip ahead of them. My phone buzzed at 10 o'clock. Unknown. We're closing the line of credit. We liked him. We like our money more. No signature. The city signs its notes with flavors and feelings these days. At 11 o'clock, Greta called, with a voice I had only heard once before, the day Werner was born. And she was a girl with hair stuck to her forehead and a laugh that sounded like a surprise she had given herself. What's in this folder? She asked. He says you gave him a plan. It's not mine anymore, I said. It's as if he signs it. It's yours to feel when the check clears. Do you think he can? She stopped. I could hear her weighing love and proof. Do you think he will? No idea, I said. I think he can. Men can lift more than they think when they stop picking up the wrong things. She was quiet for a long time. Charlotte wants to know if the tree outside 4B will have birds in the spring. It will, I said. Finches. Probably a robin. Maybe a squirrel that thinks it owns the fence. I heard her let out a breath. It sounded like a woman trying on a different life and finding it stranger and kinder than she expected. Thank you, she said, her voice low. For the kids, I said. For not wanting me to say thank you. She said with a laugh that reminded me why. Once, before the angels got all hard, I had liked her laugh. After lunch, the school called. Not mine, theirs. August Brooks, the woman asked, her tone, a careful office voice made of policy and sympathy. I'm sorry to bother you. This is Miss Miller from Fairmont. How did you get this number? I asked. Charlotte, she said, and my chest did a small thing it had not done in years. She listed you as an emergency contact last month. I've had the card in my desk. What happened? I asked, bracing for something sharp. Nothing violent, she said quickly. A rumor. Students are sharing the article on their phones. Someone said something unkind about Mr. Albrecht. Charlotte defended her father appropriately, but loudly. We separated the students. She asked if she could call you. I closed my eyes and saw a narrow hallway, lockers dented by years of boys who learned the wrong lessons. A girl with her chin up and her hands fisted so she wouldn't have to use them. Put her on, I said, and the tightness in my throat surprised even me. There was a rustle, a chair scraping, then a voice, high, soft, and low. Hi, I said. It's just me. They said things, she said, about Dad, about you. Kids say things, I said. So do grown men. Some of us learn to stop. Some of us learn to make it useful. She was quiet. Then, in a very small voice, will we move? Yes, I said. But you'll take the tree with you. That helps. Is it your tree? She asked. And I heard the engineering in the question. How kids build their bridges with pronouns first. No, I said. It's yours if you stand under it. That's how trees work. They don't check our names. She let out a breath that sounded like a child putting down a backpack. Are you mad at Dad? She asked next. I'm mad at what he did, I said. Not at you. Not at the man he still might be. She was quiet for a long time. I wondered if the line had dropped. Then, okay, she said. Bye. Bye, I said. Tell Miss Miller I'll bring muffins to the office next week. Teachers like muffins more than apologies. A half laugh. Okay. When the line clicked, I set the phone down and let the room adjust to the absence of a girl whose voice had made it larger. Then I wrote, Ms. Miller, muffins on the same index card where I had written, say peace out loud. By Friday, the second friend left him. This one he called a partner, in the kind of voice you use when you know you're lying and hope the word will make it so. The venture fund started with 3 words that read like 7. We are evaluating. That's business for. We read the article, and we're counting our money twice now, and we'll call you when we don't. Clara called to verify a quote and told me in a tone that put armor over kindness that her editor wanted a photo of me. I told her to ask Al. He's better looking, I said, and he brings stew. She laughed. You're going to make half my readers fall in love with you, she said. Then they'll get mad that you're not a tidy story. That's America, I said. We love a clean sin and a dirty redemption. This is the other way around. Friday afternoon, Werner returned. No cap, no practice smile, just a man with a folder and a pen he had not borrowed. He didn't wait for me to invite him in. He set the folder on the table. He opened to the signature page. I'll never forgive you for the way you did it, he said, his voice level. But I might thank you someday for doing it at all. I can live with that, I said. He signed. The pen left a groove I could feel with my finger. He slid the paper back to me, then to himself again, then back to me. Letting go is a skill. What now, he asked. Now, I said. You take a job. I have a degree, he said, the first week reflex of pride flaring. Good, I said. You can add and show up. My friend Lucas at the lumberyard needs someone who knows Microsoft Excel and how to lift without complaining. Pay is 18 to start, more if you last 4 months. The work ends when the truck is empty, not when your sentence does. He laughed, shocked and in pain. You want me to stock for X8S? I want you to be a man who brings home a check that can be cashed, I said. Investors don't accept potential after your name runs in the paper. They accept money with dates on it. He rubbed his jaw, feeling the stubble he had missed that morning. A boy would have said no. A man said, give me his number. I did. He typed it into his phone and, without drama, pressed call. I listened to him leave a message for a man he didn't know about a job he didn't want so he could pay people he had wronged. That's a powerful kind of sentence. It doesn't end with a period. It ends with a paycheck. He hung up. They'll call me back, he said like a boy trying on faith. They will, I said. Lucas calls everyone back. He's old-fashioned. He thinks being reachable is part of being decent. Werner stood. He didn't move to the door. I went by the hospital, he said, his eyes somewhere near the corner of the room, to the chapel. I thought about how quiet works. He glanced at me and smiled small. You were right. It's different there. It's honest there, I said. Hospitals don't lie. Their floors are too clean for it. He nodded and then did something I had stopped expecting years ago. He put his hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't grand. It was contact. It was a man saying, without language, I see you and this is awkward and also not enough and also everything I can do today. I didn't move. I let it be what it was. He left. The house didn't get bigger or smaller. It remembered it had been built to hold weather. Saturday morning, Alara arrived. I knew it was her by the knock. There's a way she hits a door that says she belongs on both sides of it. I opened to a coat worth more than a used car and a mouth set like a signature she had practiced alone. Hans wants to sue you, she said, walking right past me as if the house were a waiting room for the conversation she had brought. He says you've defamed the family. He says you're, his words, performing poverty porn. I leaned against the counter, put the kettle on because that's what the body does when the mind needs a job, and said Hans should take a nap. He has counsel, she said, her chin lifting. He always has counsel. Then he should ask them what truth is, I said, and how it enjoys the sunshine more than the shade. She laughed, not kindly, not cruelly, just tired. You think you're holy because you bought a townhouse and wrote a letter. No, I said. I think I'm done being a wallet and a wall. I poured hot water over the tea. Do you want any? No, she said, though she looked at the steam like it was speaking. We stood there like two people at the edge of a lake we couldn't enter. Finally, she set her purse down and leaned her palms on my table, the same table where our son had signed the thing that would save him if he let it. He's working at a lumberyard, she asked, as if saying it wrong would make it untrue. He is if Lucas calls back, I said, which he will. He's never done that kind of work. Then he'll be new at something, I said, which is healthy. She watched me, weighing whether I was the man she had left or the man who had mailed 7 envelopes without shaking. What if he fails? She asked, her voice small enough to be the girl I knew before we turned into the people we became. Then he'll fail honestly, I said, which is more than we can say for how he succeeded. Her eyes got glassy and angry at the same time. She blinked both back. I wanted a winner, she said like a confession she didn't know what to do with. You got one, I said. It just took longer than you planned and didn't look good on a holiday card. She exhaled a laugh that wasn't a laugh. Hans will still sue you, she said, because some people need a prophecy to keep from drowning in an admission. I'll let Marlene know, I said. She likes men who send her work that pays. Alara picked up her purse, put it down, and picked it up again. She looked around my small kitchen like it had answers I hadn't offered. You look okay, she said, a little surprised. I am, I said. Okay isn't a sin, she almost smiled. August, she stopped. No, that's not it. Peace, right? Peace, I said and meant it. And she saw that, and that made both of us a little sad for a second. After she left, I took my mug to the window. The birch branches held a thin frosting of new snow, like the sky had gotten old and careless and spilled. I thought about how the week had been a lesson in gravity. Paper drops, doors open, men fall into the work they avoided, and some of us learn to rise anyway. My phone buzzed. Lucas, Albrecht is my kind of hire, he said. Tell him 6 a.m. Monday. Steel-toe boots, gloves, donuts don't hurt. He'll be there, I said. I'll tell him about the donuts. Good, Lucas said. Men are easier when their hands are full of sugar. Saturday afternoon, Frank emailed a PDF titled Framework. I opened it and smiled despite myself. It was my restitution and repair letter rewritten in a lawyer's hand. Sterner, friendlier, and impossible to argue with. Dates had shifted. Numbers were more realistic. The line about therapy stayed. I hadn't asked for that. Frank had learned some things the hard way, too. If he performs for 6 months, Frank wrote at the end, I'll recommend to the others that we consider the civil track sufficient. If he doesn't, I won't have to recommend anything. The world will. Saturday night, the house quieted in a way I hadn't known in years. Not the quiet of being left, but the quiet of having set something down. I didn't light a fire. I didn't turn on the music. I just sat and listened to the hum of the furnace, the settling of wood, the sound a pen makes when you click it twice with no intention of writing. The text came at 10 o'clock. Werner. Lucas called. Monday. 6 o'clock. Do you have gloves? I typed, top drawer left of the sink. I'll leave them on the porch. Then I added, buy your own by Friday. The first pair is a gift. The second is a choice. He replied with a single word that hurt more than any insult he had thrown at me when he was 19. Okay. Sunday morning, the church led out onto the sidewalk, which was thinly salted. I don't go much. The chapel at the hospital is enough for me. But I stood across from St. Michael's and watched men shake hands and say old words to new people and felt a brief, angry flicker at how many of them had read Clara's piece and pretended they hadn't. Anger is bad fuel. It burns hot and leaves you cold. I walked it off and let it go. Sunday afternoon, I baked muffins and wrote a note to Miss Miller that said simply, thank you for standing in the hallway when my granddaughter needed an adult. When I was a boy, no one did that for me. Consider this gratitude with blueberries. I sealed it and put it by the door next to the gloves. Late that night, the sky started over, throwing down soft, obedient flakes. The kind that looks like forgiveness, but is just weather doing its job. I put on my coat and stepped onto the porch in socks. I let the cold find my ankles, breathed in the way a man does when he's testing his lungs and his choices. The lights across the street went out one by one. The town turned into a collection of rectangles with secrets inside. I stood until my toes told me I was being foolish, then went back in and set an alarm for 6:15. It felt like a thing fathers do, even when their sons are men. At 6:12 a.m., I was at the sink with a mug in my hand when headlights crawled slowly past my window and stopped outside. A car idled. The door opened, footsteps on my walk. A hand reached for the gloves I had left on the chair by the door. A soft knock, not the way he had always knocked like the house owed him, but a man checking on another man. I opened the door to Werner, in the coat that had seen better offices and worse mornings. He held up the gloves like proof we were both telling the truth. Lucas likes bear claws, I said as a sort of blessing. Copy, he said. He shifted, then looked me in the eyes. Dad, he began, and it was enough. No speech, no performance. 2 letters rebuilt into a bridge. Go, I said. Lift. He went. When the engine faded, the house didn't feel empty. It felt used well. I set my mug down and took the index card from under the folder. I added a 5th line in the same block letters I had used at the pack and ship counter. Earned is greater than owed. Then I put the card back and turned off the kitchen light, because there's a kind of darkness you get to choose after you finally stopped being someone's flashlight and learned how to hand them a map. By Monday at noon, the town had learned a new trick, how to look away without looking guilty. It's a local art, one I recognized from old union halls and chamber breakfasts. When a man is falling, the room doesn't shout. It studies exits. I started the day early because he did. At 6:45 a.m., I stood behind my front door and watched the shape of my son climb the short walk and take the gloves I had left on the chair. He tapped once gently like a neighbor, and I opened to see a man dressed for humility. Steel-toe boots, a borrowed beanie, the coat that had always pretended to be warmer than it was. "Lucas likes bear claws," I said. "Copy," he said, smiling like a boy borrowing a grown man's word. He went. I made tea because coffee made my heart remind me how stubborn it still was. At 7:30, a text. "Werner." Clocked in. "Cart math is harder than I thought." I wrote back nothing. He didn't need encouragement more than he needed the next pallet. By 10 o'clock, the phones had learned a different rhythm. Marlene messaged. "Recorder posted deed in lieu notice, now public. A few calls are incoming. All are screened." Frank emailed a single line. "First restitution received." He attached a screenshot of a deposit for $19,457. It wasn't a lot, and it was everything. Men build good lives the way they build bookcases that don't wobble, by getting the first hole straight. I went for a walk. The town had that hard January light that makes every surface look honest. The birch by my window held a thin rime like a secret it didn't mind sharing. I thought about the first time I had walked these blocks after the divorce, and how the air had felt like it owned the place more than I did. This morning, the ownership felt mutual. When I returned, the red light on the landline, that old stubborn device that refuses to die, was blinking. 2 messages. The first, in a voice I didn't know. "Mr. Brooks, this is David from First Lakeside. We wanted to confirm receipt of the assignment of the mortgage. Please contact our loss mitigation department. A good time to call is between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Also, your approach was appreciated. Our team is used to seeing these go another way." The second was a voice I knew too well by now. Polite because she makes politeness a tool. "Mr. Brooks, Clara here. Quick question. There's going to be a breakfast at the Hyatt Regency on Thursday. Startups and small business mixers do their networking over piles of eggs and weak coffee. Word is Hans Richter's firm will be there and is telling a tight circle that you're, quote, orchestrating a vendetta. If you show up, say nothing. All you need to do is exist. The room will do the rest." I didn't answer. Then I made a note on the index card under my folder. "Eggs. Hans Richter. Exist. You can destroy a performance by refusing to audition." At 1 o'clock, the lumberyard horn blew, a soft, old-world sound. Then again at 1:30. At 1:45, the phone rang. "Dad," he said, his breath still climbing. "Lucas is a machine. He knows where every 4x8 in Wyoming wants to be." "Good," I said. "I didn't drop anything," he added, like a child telling me he had kept his lunch money safe. "He told me to use my legs. I did." "You'll sleep well?" I said. "That's a wage you don't report." He hesitated. "Tonight, we'll start packing. Charlotte wants to label boxes by room. Leo says he'll help if there's pizza." "Pizza helps everything," I said. "Will you?" He stopped. The sentence wasn't sure if it wanted to finish. "No," he said. "We'll manage." "You will," I said. "Check the bottom of the junk drawer for Sharpies. Every house hides them there." He laughed, caught himself, and let it turn into a breath. "Okay." We hung up. I stood in my kitchen and realized something had shifted in me. The version of the story where my son was a bad guy had started to learn the language of work. Bad guys don't carry plywood. They stand in offices and call other men from behind glass. The next call wasn't my favorite. "August Brooks," Hans Richter said, his voice smooth as the sleeves on his shirts. "We need to talk." "No," I said, because older men are allowed to enjoy being brief. He laughed like he had been challenged to a game he wrote the rules for daily. "We'll talk," he said, not put off. "Thursday, the Hyatt Regency. Come early. I'll buy you orange juice." "You always liked the stage," I said. "And you always liked the ledger," he replied. "See you then." He hung up before I could deny him the pleasure of predicting me. I stood there for a long time with the deadline in my ear and thought about how men like him confuse confidence with fate. I left my house at dusk. Some nights want you to see them. Some settle behind your windows and mind their own business. This one showed off, a sky the color of a deep bruise, a streetlight switching on slowly, as if embarrassed to work for the same city that forgot to salt last week. I drove across town to 4B. The Riverbend townhomes looked good in winter. Brick holds cold like it respects it. Snow took up the space between shrubs with the dignity a lawn rarely manages. I parked and stayed in the car for a minute, listening to the engine tick and cool. Then I saw them. Charlotte dragging a box on a towel because she couldn't lift it. Leo carrying a trash bag he had forgotten to tie. Greta thumped a lamp against the door frame, swore under her breath accurately, and then set it down to check the edge. A new chapter. Werner was the last to arrive, balancing a couple of boxes like he was learning a new way to deal with corners. I got out of my car and gave him some space until he was ready. It's a lesson I picked up late. Don't let your help become a show that robs someone else of their pride. Charlotte saw me first. She straightened up, surprised. Then that little chin of hers went up in a neat little nod. Hi, she said. Hi, I said. Boxes have a secret trick. Tilt them on their edge when you turn corners. They like that. We figured that out, she said. And just like that, the air between us got a little warmer. Greta turned, the lamp still in her hand like a reluctant weapon. She didn't smile. She just gave me a nod. For Greta, a nod is an act of trust. I gave her one back in the same size. Werner walked toward me. We're good, he said, his breath visible in the air. We've got it covered. I know, I said. I just came to see the tree. It's over there, Charlotte said, pointing. In a courtyard. Ms. Hahn says sometimes kids can use chalk on the sidewalk when it's warm. She said we can, too. You can, I said. Chalk doesn't check bank accounts either. Leo, who had treated me so far like a relative whose existence messed with his video games, looked up and said, Can I write Go Big Red on the walkway? Someone has to, I said. Do it in March. The chalk will last longer. We all stood in the courtyard like a family that was learning a new language. Different letters, same meaning. I didn't stay long. This was their evening, not mine. When I turned to go, Greta said without meaning to, We have extra pizza. If you're... She stopped. The invitation had gotten ahead of her mouth. Another time, I said. Men who move need second slices. She nodded again, then surprised us both. Thank you, she said. Clean, no frills. For the tree, I said. For the door, she countered. And I didn't disagree. On the drive home, the radio played a high school basketball game. The announcer had the kind of voice that still called a jump shot a set shot. It settled my nerves. By the time I turned onto my street, my house didn't look lonely. It looked like a man waiting up for an honest tired. Truth and consequences. Thursday arrived with the kind of wind that makes you question your choices. I put on the coat that had been with me longer than most friends and drove to the Hyatt Regency, because sometimes just being there is all the geometry a room requires. They held these breakfasts in ballrooms that were trying to seem cheerful. Round tables, tablecloths that forgave crumbs, scrambled eggs that tasted like a secret you once told someone who didn't deserve it. I paid cash for my ticket. The woman at the registration table smiled at a volunteer who had already had 4 small arguments before 10 o'clock. Name, she asked. Brooks, I said. Her eyes went to the list, and then back up to me with a new warmth I didn't need. We're glad you're here, she said, and we both heard glad change its close mid-sentence. The room hummed. Laughter was too loud from men who needed everyone to know they weren't worried. Whispers came from women who ran the actual numbers under the tablecloth. I found a spot against a wall like I always do in rooms that love attention. I held a plate. I ate nothing. The door opened again, and the wind brought in a man who had never enjoyed being cold. Hans Richter looked the way men do when they've never had to lift plywood. Clean. His hair behaved. His coats were expensive enough to be a second mortgage in towns that don't get write-ups in magazines. He cut a path through the tables with the ease of someone who believes every room is waiting for him to finish the scene. He saw me. He didn't pause. He came right over. August, he said like we'd just parted after a reunion that had gone his way. You came. I did, I said. You must be proud, he said with that half-pity, half-needling tone he had practiced the year he met my wife. Your strategy is working. I mailed paper, I said. You build a narrative, he corrected. No, I said. I ended one. The one where I'm a man you can talk over. He smiled like a politician who believes he invented politeness. You hurt your son, he said, lowering his voice for effect. Does that taste good? Hurting people? It tastes like the truth, I said. You should try it without garnish. His eyes went cold. You think you've won? I think I laid down a load I should have put down years ago, I said. If that looks like winning from where you're standing, try carrying anything for 30 years. Clever, he said in the way men do when they wish they had just said what you said. Here's my clever, he added, leaning in. We're filing. Defamation, interference, emotional distress. File, I said. Offices need paperwork. He stared at me with a mix of admiration and calculation, like a chess player meeting a man who knows the endgame. Then he moved, because that's what he does when a performance hits a wall. He finds a new audience. He climbed 3 shallow steps to the small riser where the breakfast panel would be. He didn't have a microphone. He had his voice, which he had always believed in. He clapped once, the way headmasters do. Folks, he said, a quick note before we talk about the year ahead. This community thrives on trust, and trust requires. He didn't get to finish the line. Clara arrived as if she had rehearsed with the lighting. She stood across the room, not front, not center, just inside the line of sight where people had to choose whether to pretend not to see her. She didn't raise her hand. She raised her phone, camera face down, voice memo up, and didn't hit record. She didn't have to. The room recorded itself when she showed up. Hans saw her. His cadence was broken for just a second. He recovered in the way men do when they were told they were the weather and everyone else was just trying not to get wet. And trust requires mercy, he finished, pivoting. Mercy for men who have erred. The word men hung there, fat and heavy, asking for votes. Some were ready to raise their hands. Then Al, the neighbor with the stew, appeared at my elbow with a plate of eggs and said too loudly, "Don't these taste like the foam the car wash uses?" The men at the next table laughed too quickly. The spell was broken. Hans smiled wider because when you lose a room, you act like you never wanted it. Clara caught my eye and gave a tiny nod. The kind you exchange with people who do their jobs from the other side of your problem. I nodded back and left, because staying would have turned a thing that had already happened into a thing I was accused of doing. Outside, the wind had decided to be honest. It cut right through the better part of the coat. My breath looked concerned in the air. I drove to the lumber yard because sometimes the right thing to look at is wood under a soft gray sky. Lucas shook my hand like a man who had been shaking things longer than the boys around him had been alive. He had sawdust in the crease of his wrist. He's slow, he said without apology or insult. But he's steady. I like steady. I can teach speed. Most men don't want to learn steadily. Your boy does. Thank you, I said. He needs a foreman who is kinder than he is patient. Lucas grinned. I can be both. Tell him to eat more. He looks like a keyboard with shoes. I walked to the far bay and found Werner learning what it means to stand in one place and sweat without embarrassment. He saw me, startled, then covered the startle by taking a step toward the next task. He lifted, loaded, measured, mismeasured, corrected, and finally turned. You left the breakfast early, he said, as if he hadn't been there, but knew anyway. Rooms that believe themselves aren't good for my blood pressure, I said. Hans wants to sue you. He said, Hans wants to be young again. He can't, I said. He can pay a lawyer to dress him like yesterday. That's as close as he gets. Werner laughed, a sound almost without bitterness. He pulled a pencil from behind his ear, marked a line on a board, and made the cut. The saw shrieked. The line wavered. The board split true. Anyway, I paid Frank again, he said, not meeting my eyes. $200 next week. The hardware store down the road needs weekend help. I told them I can count. They like that more than my degree. Good, I said. Degrees are useful. Counting is rent. He nodded to the pile he had made. Lucas says I can graduate to the forklift when I stop pretending it's a dragon. He's right, I said. Dragons don't stack pallets. Men do. I left him to his dragons. On the drive home, I passed a billboard that used to have his smile next to a phrase about solutions. Now it advertised a car wash a mile past its prime. The world is efficient when you let it be. A quiet reckoning. The afternoon brought an email from the State Securities Bureau. We have received your materials and begun preliminary review. We may request additional information. Thank you for your cooperation. It read like a bus schedule. It comforted me more than any speech. Buses and bureaucrats, if you don't fight their slowness, they'll carry you. At 4 o'clock, Miss Miller from Fairmont texted a photo of Charlotte's chalk drawing on the 4B walkway. The chalk was pale against the winter concrete, but I could make out a tree, a square for the bedroom window, and underneath, 3 block letters, G, R, A. The N had gone long, like a child trying to make the end of a word shake hands with the world outside it. Above the N, a neat, small exclamation point. I didn't cry. Some people prefer the privacy of a man in a kitchen at 10 p.m. Dinner was a can of chili and the last of Al's stew. I warmed them together and called it a recipe. The doorbell rang at 7 o'clock. I opened it to find Greta in a coat that tried to stay angry but failed. Leo wants to return your Tupperware, she said, holding it up like proof of civilization. He can toss it at the house, I said. We're even that way. She almost smiled. He drew a playbook for the chalk. Of course he did, I said. She looked past me into the house and then did a surprising thing. May I come in? I moved aside. She stepped into the kitchen as if it were a truce and set the container on the counter like a signature on a treaty. I hate you, she said. It wasn't venom. It was her life story. I hated you more last week. I can hold both. I'm getting good at multiple truths, I said. You know what I mean? She pressed forward so she didn't have to feel the first thing. You embarrassed us. You bought our house like it was a couch at a yard sale. You staged a morality play in our den. I did a house cleaning, I said. It turns out both metaphors use the same broom. She stared at me. I let her. When your wife left you, she said finally. Did you think you would ever be this man? No, I said. I thought I'd be smaller forever. She nodded like she'd measured me and found the number a little bigger than last time. He's tired, she said. He sleeps without moving. He snores. Good, I said. Men who snore have finally given up on their PR teams. She laughed softly. Then she looked at the list stuck to my fridge with a magnet shaped like Wyoming. She read the bullet points without asking. Stop answering first. Trust the paper. Leave a door open for the children. Say peace out loud. Earned is greater than owed. Did you write these for him? She asked. For me, I said. He can borrow them. She reached out, tapped the last one. He could never read the 5th line, she said. He thought owed was earned. It's how he was raised. I helped, I said, by making love into an overdraft. I stopped. He'll have to too. She put her hands in her coat pockets and pulled them back out again like the air had told her it was time to be done. Charlotte wants to bring muffins to Miss Miller, she said. We'll go tomorrow. If you already did, bring more, I said. Teachers count gratitude the way bankers count money, by weight, not by promises. She nodded, then in a voice so small it could have been a girl, said, Thank you for the tree. Thank you for not making me say you're welcome, I said. And we both smiled for a second, like people who find themselves humane in the middle of a fight. After she left, I stood at the sink and washed the Tupperware like it was a family heirloom. Men like me make ceremonies out of the right chores. It helps. A final show. Thursday opened a new door. Clara's third piece didn't lead with numbers. It led with a sentence I recognized because she had tried it out on the phone and I'd told her to keep it. Some reckonings are not loud. They are patient. The article was a portrait, not a prosecution. It described a father who had refused to turn vengeance into a spectacle. A son who had begun, just begun, to stand still and do a job. It quoted Helen briefly and beautifully. I don't need him punished. I need him changed. The only way to know is time and receipts. It mentioned the deed in lieu without drama. It did not name 4B. Mercy works best when clean. The article did something else. It took a sentence from Miss Miller, the kind of adult who knows how to use her voice. Teenagers don't need the internet to be cruel. They need adults who show up anyway. It included a photo shot from sidewalk level of chalk on a courtyard path. You could make out a tree and a window and 3 block letters. G, R, A. Clara didn't identify the letters. She didn't need to. The town knew how to read. By afternoon, my phone was full of messages from men I hadn't seen in years. That's how it goes. Some praise. Some ask for coffee to pick my brain. Some send chest-thumping advice about how I should go for the jugular. I wrote back to none of them. Jugulars are for men with trophies on mantles. I prefer receipts on fridges. That night, the lumberyard called. Not Lucas. A number marked as office. Is this Mr. Brooks? A woman asked. Yes. Werner fainted, she said. Her voice wasn't panicked, it was practical. He stood up too fast after moving the plywood, and down he went. He's fine. He's embarrassed. We told him embarrassment is cheaper than ER bills. He drank water. He's sitting in the break room, looking like a boy who just lost a fight with gravity. I'll come get him, I said. No need, she said. Lucas is driving him home. He says men don't go home with their fathers after they faint, unless they're 12. I heard muffled laughter on her end, then a softer tone. He's trying, Mr. Brooks. It's obvious. I know, I said. Thank you for telling me he fainted like a lumberjack and not a soprano. She laughed. We serve all types, she said and hung up. 15 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I opened to Lucas, hat pushed back, grin ready, and Werner, his color returning like a reluctant guest. He needs soup, Lucas said, and salt and a nap where nobody thinks he's a metaphor. I've got stew, I said, and I'm fresh out of metaphors. Lucas clapped Werner on the shoulder. 7 a.m. Monday, he said. Don't make me come get you. I will, and I'll honk. He left. Werner stepped inside and sat on my chair like it had been waiting for him. I'm fine, he said, which is what men say when they have recently fallen. I know, I said, which is what fathers say when they're trying to teach a different lesson. You don't have to be. I heated the stew. We didn't talk much. The house was good at that now, letting words go if they weren't useful. Halfway through his second bowl, he said, they read the article at the Yard. Men who lift read. I teased. They do when there's a picture of a tree, he said and smiled. We sat. He finished. He stood at the door. He turned. I'm sorry, he said. Out of order. Late. A different tense than I had expected, which made it real. I know, I said and meant it. And then, peace. He breathed the word in like he was trying it on. Peace, he said back and left. Friday was moving day. I didn't plan to go. I went anyway. You can let a man lift his boxes and still be there when the tape gives up. They had rented a truck that had seen better weekends. Men in their 40s know renting trucks is a tax on backs. Al showed up without being asked. 2 teenagers from up the block came for the pizza and stayed for the way Lucas paid cash. I carried lamps. I carried nothing heavy. I learned this late. Carry the things that let other people think they carried the day. At 4B, Ms. Hahn stood with a clipboard, moving like a conductor who preferred no applause. She pointed to the mailboxes, the trash area, and the place where packages hide. She introduced a woman named Lillian from Unit 2A, who had lived there since her husband died, and who said, I know when the plows come and when they don't. I'll text you before dawn if you should move your car. If you don't, I'll bang on your door. Welcome, Greta cried, which is to say her eyes shone, and she walked away so no one could call it crying. Charlotte took the keys and did what children do with small powers. She opened, closed, opened again, and declared the lock friendly. Leo asked where the closest pizza place was now. I said, the one that delivers. And he nodded wisely, like a man with priorities. We emptied the truck. We ate standing up. We broke down boxes. We watched as the first child walked the chalk to the courtyard and added in a crooked, honorable hand the last letter. N-D. It looked wrong and right at the same time, like a word that forgot half itself and still managed to say everything. I went home before sunset. On my porch under the glove hook sat a paper sack with 2 bear claws. No note. Lucas's handwriting is the kind made by a man whose hands have better work. My phone buzzed as I carried the sack in. Unknown. We're evaluating. With a screen capture of a venture fund statement. Then a second text from a different number. Closing the line for now. No hard feelings. The city is polite when it cuts you away from its money. It prefers to do it with manners. At 9 o'clock, Clara called to tell me that Hans had filed nothing, had spoken to 2 lawyers who quoted him numbers, and had rephrased his outrage into a post about accountability and compassion that even his friends found embarrassing. I didn't say I was surprised. I was not. Men like Hans rarely go to court. They go to cocktails. Before bed, I walked outside with the sack, took a bite of a bear claw that tasted like a promise kept, and looked up. The sky was clear. Stars took up their old posts, the kind men always point at when they want to feel small. I didn't feel small. I felt accurate. Inside, I pulled the index card out, added a 6th line. Show up, then shut up. I slid it back under the folder and turned out the light. The furnace hummed. The house settled 3 millimeters into its foundation, proud of itself. Down the street, a plow groaned its way past, late and loud, making a seam down the middle like a stitched wound that had decided to heal. Some reckonings are not loud, Clara wrote. She was right. They're steady. They're breakfast rooms that stop applauding. They're lumberyards at 7 a.m. and chalk that survives a thaw. They're a boy who fainted and a man who went back to lift anyway. They're a grandfather who learns to be a father by not being a savior. Tomorrow would bring receipts and weekends and a foreman who honked when you weren't ready. It would bring a mother who learned to say thanks without an audience. A girl who knew which way to hold a key. A boy who wanted pizza and for once deserved it. It would bring wind and headlines and maybe, if the world had a sense of humor, a robin in a tree no one owned and everyone could stand under. Peace, I said to the dark. It didn't answer. It didn't need to. Endgame. I don't usually come to the financial district in the morning, but today I stood across the street, both hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee, letting the heat seep into my cold knuckles. Albrecht and Sons headquarters loomed above me, tall glass panels gleaming like they'd been polished just to reflect the slate-gray sky. The clouds hung low and heavy, ready to burst. In front of the building, a crowd had gathered. Not the kind of crowd that gets paid to clap. This one was all cameras on shoulders, long lenses glinting in the light, microphones with black foam heads thrust forward like spears. Questions were being hurled, rapid fire, clanging against each other in the cold air. And in the center of it all, Werner. Gray overcoat, charcoal tie, the smile that had lost all of its shine. He tried to keep his spine straight, but his shoulders had curled inward, his left hand twitching now and then as if it wanted to clutch the lapel tighter. I sipped my coffee, keeping my eyes on him. Albrecht, is it true investors are pulling out? Werner, did you mislead the Securities Bureau about your bridge funding? Are you aware of the lawsuit filed yesterday in the county court? He didn't answer. Each question tightened his mouth a little more. Greta wasn't there, only a young assistant with a pale, paper-like face trying to shield him from the tide. A black SUV idled at the curb. The driver had the back door open, gesturing for him to get in. But even those 10 meters became a gauntlet, flashes exploding like white knives, voices chasing him to the door. I knew exactly who had sent Clara's press release to the media and who had slipped a copy of the civil suit to his investors. I didn't need to be in that scrum to see the rope I had tied drawing taut. A strong gust of wind whipped down the street, carrying the mix of car exhaust and coffee from a corner cafe. It pulled me back to another morning, years ago. Werner standing tall on the stage at his MBA graduation, black gown and square cap, looking every inch the golden boy. He'd glanced at me once, quick and cool, before turning back to his friends. That day I'd been first to arrive, front row. I had believed in his potential like I believed the sun would rise. Now the same morning light fell on a different face. The face of a man scanning for an exit without looking like he was running. The SUV rolled forward, swallowed by traffic. I didn't follow. Instead, I crossed to the cafe opposite the building and took a seat by the window, where I had a clear view of the glass atrium. Inside, several men and women in dark suits clustered in a tight circle, their postures sharp, phones in hand. One lifted a thick binder, the kind I recognized instantly as Schmidt and Bauer's work. I didn't need the audio to know what was being discussed. I pulled up the news on my phone. Front page business section, Albrecht and Sons facing investor lawsuits, regulatory inquiry. There was Clara's photo, Werner ducking into the SUV, his eyes avoiding the lens. Beneath it, sources say investors have received notice from regulators regarding potential violations tied to bridge funding activities. I took another sip. The coffee had cooled, but the bitterness stayed. The cafe door swung open with a rush of cold air and a familiar voice. August, he said. I looked up. It was Frank Bauer, turtleneck, tweed overcoat, still carrying himself like a man who could stare down a boardroom. He set his coffee down on my table without asking. Better view from out here, he asked, sliding into the chair opposite. I don't need to be in the middle of it, I said. Some scenes are clearer from a distance. Frank smirked. You haven't changed. Still know how to move a piece and let the board tie itself in knots. I glanced back out the window. Some positions, I said. You just have to place the first stone. Gravity does the rest. He leaned forward. Emergency meetings happening upstairs. Some people were saying Werner should step down for a while. Greta was trying to get the other side to rally. I didn't think she understood this thing was already past her control. I just stayed quiet, watching the snow begin to fall, small flakes swirling in lazy circles. In my head, Greta's voice echoed from a Christmas dinner years ago, sharp and dismissive. We don't need anyone slowing Werner down. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a couple of reporters slip into the building, their cameras ready. The glass doors closed behind them, muting the noise. But the window of time for Werner was getting smaller. Frank sipped his coffee. You going too? He started, but let the sentence just hang there. I didn't fill in the silence. I thought about the call with Clara 3 days ago when I'd said just one thing. Don't release everything at once. Let them expose themselves. Most of the mess now wasn't from my accusations, but from the chain reaction of those who'd once put their money on Werner. Outside, the street began to blur with the snow. The world turned into a place of shapes and shadows. I considered staying a little longer, not to help, not to strike again, but just to witness the moment a man who thought he was untouchable realized the ground beneath him was nothing but sand. Frank stood up and got his coat. I've got another meeting, but I'm guessing this isn't the end of it. No, I said, my eyes still on the building. This is just when they first hear the water. When Frank left, I kept my seat. On the 3rd floor, a window cracked open. I saw Greta leaning out, a phone to her ear, her gestures quick and impatient. Werner wasn't there. He was probably in some closed room with people who used to shake his hand and now wanted it clean. Then a side door opened, and Werner came out alone, no assistant, scanning the street like a man looking for a back exit. His gaze swept in my direction, but I was just a faint shadow behind the cafe glass. I put my coffee down. Every possibility felt open in that moment. His eyes swept over the street once, twice, too fast to pick out anyone, but too slow to hide that he was searching for a lifeline. I stayed still behind the cafe window. Glass is a strange shield. It makes you invisible enough to watch, but not enough to be unseen. He would have to stare to recognize me. Werner wasn't staring. He was searching. The snowfall got heavier, blurring the shapes of the cars. He pulled his collar up and walked quickly toward the alley that cut between the high-rise and the parking structure. For a long moment, I stayed in my chair, letting the decision settle. There's a particular pull when you see someone you've known in 2 different lives. The boy who once looked up to you, and the man who now looks everywhere. But I stood up, left the half-empty cup on the table, and stepped into the cold. Snow stung the skin under my eyes as I crossed the street. My boots bit into the slush, each step deliberate. When I turned into the alley, I saw him about 30 yards ahead, pacing under the overhang of a loading dock. A cigarette burned between his fingers, though I'd never known him to smoke. Werner. He froze when he heard his name. The cigarette drooped, ash scattering onto the damp concrete. He turned. Dad. The word was thin, like it had been kept in a drawer for too long. For a beat, neither of us moved. Snow gathered on the brim of his coat, melting into dark spots. You following me? He asked finally. No. Watching. His jaw tightened. You here to enjoy this? If I wanted to enjoy it, I said, I wouldn't have stayed outside. The cigarette trembled slightly between his fingers. They want me to step down, he said. Temporary, they say, just until this clears. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Temporary means gone. You know that. I didn't answer. You've been feeding them, he said, his voice low. The press, the regulators. I know you have. Not feeding, I said, pointing at the building. They already had an appetite. His eyes flickered, not with guilt, but with the recognition of a move he might have made himself. You think this fixes anything? No, I said. I think it stops it from getting worse for everyone else. He looked past me to where the street was a pale blur. You could have come to me. I did. Years ago. You told me winning was all that mattered. His mouth opened, then closed. He flicked the cigarette into the gutter, the ember hissing out in the slush. They're going after Greta, too, he said. She hitched herself to your cart. I said, don't be surprised when she feels the pull downhill. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the building's vents. Do you think I'm a bad man? He asked quietly. I think you stopped asking that question a long time ago, I said. His shoulders slumped. He looked smaller somehow, like the suit wasn't tailored for this version of him. You could still help me, he said. Tell them it's not what it looks like, that I just made mistakes. And what would you do differently? I asked. He hesitated. And that, more than any answer, was my answer. I'm not here to rescue you, I said. I'm here to make sure the ones who can't fight back get left standing. A horn blared from the street, cutting the air between us. He flinched like it was aimed at him. "You'll regret this," he said finally, his voice brittle. "I regret plenty already," I said, and stepped past him toward the street. I didn't look back until I reached the corner. He was still there under the overhang, watching the snow like it might tell him what to do next. I spent the afternoon at Marlena's office. She had the conference table covered in manila folders, each one labeled in her tight block handwriting. "Investor Group's filing was accepted this morning," she said, sliding a copy toward me. "Frank's name is on it, along with Helen and Raj." She tapped another folder. "The Bureau's inquiry has gone formal. They sent the notice certified." And she paused. "Two former employees from Albrecht and Sons reached out. Whistleblowers." I scanned the affidavit. Accounts of doctored quarterly reports, misrepresented client lists, and funds moved through shell accounts. "They're good witnesses?" I asked. "Solid," she said. "One's got email chains. The other kept meeting notes, detailed ones. If Werner thought loyalty would keep them quiet, he miscalculated." I leaned back, feeling the weight of it. "You're not smiling," she said. "I'm not in this for smiles." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned. "Speak of the devil." She turned the screen so I could see Werner Albrecht calling. I shook my head. She let it go to voicemail. "Next steps," she said briskly. "We prep for depositions. You keep your distance. No contact that can be spun as interference." She paused. "You think he's going to run?" "No," I said. "Not yet. He still thinks he can talk his way out." By the time I left her office, the snow had stopped. The air was sharp, the kind that makes sound carry. I drove past Albrecht and Sons again, not intending to stop, until I saw the knot of people outside had doubled. This wasn't media now. These were employees. Some smoked in small groups. Others just stood with arms crossed, their eyes on the revolving door. Through the glass, Werner was visible in the lobby, speaking to two men in suits. Greta stood off to the side, her expression tight. And then, unexpectedly, Charlotte and Leo, standing with a woman I didn't know, both looking small in the crowd. Charlotte spotted me through the windshield and gave the slightest nod. I pulled into a side street and walked back, keeping to the edges. The woman with them noticed me first. "You're," she began. "Just here to make sure they get home," I said quietly. She studied me, then stepped aside. Charlotte's eyes searched mine. "He's mad," she whispered. I crouched a little to meet her eye level. "You're not the reason for that." Leo stayed quiet, his hands deep in his pockets. The revolving door spun. Werner stepped out, scanning the crowd, and froze when he saw me with them. For a moment, something almost like fear crossed his face. "Dad," he said, striding over. "What are you?" "I'm making sure they're not standing out here in the cold," I said. "They're fine," he said quickly. "They're coming with me," I said. His jaw worked. Greta joined us, her voice sharp. "You don't get to just take them." "They're not packages," I said. "They can choose." I looked at Charlotte. She glanced at her brother, then back at me. "I want to go," she said. Leo nodded. Werner's mouth opened, but before he could speak, a reporter's camera flashed inches from his face. Questions flew again, chaotic, and in that moment, I guided the kids toward the street. I didn't look back. We drove in silence. Charlotte sat in the front, Leo in the back, both watching the city lights slip past. At a red light, Charlotte said softly, "Is he going to be okay?" I kept my eyes on the road. "That depends on what he decides now." She nodded, biting her lip. When I dropped them at 4B, the property manager was waiting, keys in hand. No mention of me, just the quiet efficiency of a plan working as intended. I stood at the curb until the door closed behind them. Some things you do for the world to see. Others you do so that no one ever knows. That night, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A text. "He's burning bridges faster than he can build them." I didn't reply. I already knew this wasn't the finale. But the fire was spreading. And sometimes the only thing you can do is let it. The morning the consent order was scheduled, the sky turned the color of old paper. That thin, pre-snow light. Honest, tired, unwilling to pretend it was anything but what it was. I shaved with the carefulness you give to endings. Then I took the rubber-banded stack of letters from the drawer, the ones I'd written and never sent, and slid them into my coat pocket. Not to read again, but to carry once more to the place where I would finally decide what I was keeping and what I was setting down. The courthouse on East Street has learned how to swallow noise. Even when voices rise on the steps, They flatten once you pass the metal detector. Inside, the floor carries you whether you feel like moving or not. I walked to the second floor, to a conference room with a window that framed a map of the parking lot. Marlena was already there, sorting manila folders into neat stacks like a woman laying out instruments before a surgery. "Morning," she said, crisp and kind in the same breath. "They'll wrangle the civil group first, bureau after. Frank's here." She tilted her head toward the far corner. Frank stood with his hands in his pockets, looking exactly the way you want the man you hurt to look when he has decided not to hate you forever, contained, resolute, alive to the possibility of a better outcome that will require work. "August," he said. "Blizzard coming." "They always say that," I said. "Sometimes it's just weather." He smiled, then let the smile go. "You hear?" Two more employees came forward. "One of them has a Slack export that's going to make a compliance officer cry." Marlena slid a packet across to me. "Proposed consent order." The language was the language of men who learned precision so they didn't have to shout. No admission of guilt for purposes of civil litigation, but acknowledgement of conduct. 7-year bar from serving as officer or director of any entity raising public or private capital. Monetary penalty. Mandatory restitution plan, documentation, quarterly compliance check-ins. "He'll try to bargain the 7 down to 5, Marlena said, tapping the page like she was telling a nail it would be enough. "Don't react. It's the bureau's call. What matters is the bar and the paper trail." A knock at the door. The court reporter slid in and arranged her machine with the reverence of a man setting an altar. Then Clara stepped through the doorway, her shoulders dusted with cold, her notebook already open to a blank page. "You're not going to get much," Marlena said without looking up. "I'm not here for much," Clara said. "I'm here for the doorknob turns." She moved to the wall and became a shadow with ears. "That's a skill you can't teach." The door opened again. Greta came in first, her coat black, her mouth a line drawn straight with a ruler. Behind her was Werner. The suit fit worse than it used to. Pride, the human kind and the fabric kind, share a weakness. They both show where a man has been thin. He glanced at me, then away. We were all mirrors at the wrong angles. Counsel for the investors sat. Counsel for Albrecht and Sons sat. The bureau attorney sat with the measured stillness of a person who eats policy for breakfast and calls it bread. Marlena gathered the room with her voice and began. Pages turned. Dates were said out loud. The pen of the court reporter made a low, industrious scratching, like winter mice. It didn't feel like a fight. It felt like a slow, careful negotiation between gravity and a house that had been built on ground that shifted when it rained. Werner spoke once when his counsel nudged him. "I regret," he began, and his tongue seemed to have to learn the word. "I regret the confusion caused." His lawyer squeezed his wrist under the table, hard enough that even from across the room, I could see the lesson. Use English, not fog. He swallowed. "I misrepresented timelines. I overpromised. I spent money I shouldn't have. I am trying to repair." No one applauded. People think sanction days end in gavel cracks. Mostly they end in printers warming up and signatures that leave ridges on paper. When the bureau attorney summarized the bar, Werner's jaw worked, wanting to argue the number down like a man haggling over a used truck. His counsel leaned in. He didn't push. He signed. The room exhaled the way a place does when something large has been moved out of it. Frank looked at the signature and nodded once. Nothing like triumph in it. Only relief, in a key too low to hear if you were listening to music. Outside in the corridor between conferences, there is a window that looks over a frostbitten lawn and a bench nobody sits on in January. We all needed air, but didn't take it. We stood in little clusters and let administrative staff change out binders like stagehands. Greta intercepted me while Werner was pinned to a corner by his attorney, a man explaining consequences to a man who had paid to forget how they work. "Happy?" she asked. The question held no curiosity. It was theater, and she was good at theater. "No," I said, prepared. "You've ruined his life," she said flatly, like a weather report. "No," I said again. "He chose a life that couldn't stand." I asked the man he knocked over to stand back up. She stared at me for a long time, which wasn't long on a clock. "You and your cold mercy," she said, tossing the phrase like cutlery into a sink. "You prefer heat," I said. Marlena's arm grazed mine. "Hall," she said low, a shepherding that could pass for politeness to anyone not looking. In the hall, Werner waited for me. The doors closed on the bureau room behind us. The carpet held the sound of our shoes the way winter holds breath. "What do you want?" he said finally, not as a challenge, but as a man who has learned he can't leave the question unanswered. "Another season." I let the pause earn its keep. Then I said, "I want you to do the work, and keep doing it when no one is watching. I want your kids to see you do it. I want checks cashed on the 5th. I want your name on a sheet at the lumberyard that says, 'Hours worked.' I want your mouth to say fewer words and your hands to carry more things." He closed his eyes for a second, like the light hurt. "You know, you could have just given me the money," he said, soft, amazed at his remaining capacity to ask. "I tried giving you things," I said. "You learned that giving meant owing." I stopped. "There's a different gift." He waited. Pride is loud on the way up. It whispers when it's tired. "I set up a trust," I said, "for Charlotte and Leo. It's not big enough to save anyone from work. It is big enough to keep a college bill from turning into a cliff. You are not a trustee. You will never be a trustee. The rules are plain. No one touches a dime if you lie about where the restitution stands. No one touches a dime if you stop showing up for work. The only person who can suspend distributions if you regress is the kid's school counselor. She knows how to tell the truth when it's inconvenient." His eyes found mine and stayed there. For a second, the look was the boy with the split lip and the bike chain that wouldn't catch. Then the man returned, and with him the discomfort of not having an argument left to make. "Why do that?" he said after the heir had had enough time to mark the question as genuine. "Because," I said, "I'm done financing your delusions, but I will fund their future if you stop trying to steal it." He almost laughed. It came out as a breath. "There's always a condition with you." "There's always a condition with reality," I said. "My mistake was pretending you could skip it." He looked like he wanted to put a hand on my shoulder and didn't know if the rule book allowed it. Then the bureau door opened, and the corridor moved us all like a slow river at a bend. The consent order was entered. The civil framework was signed. A notary with a Santa mug on her desk stamped a seal with the satisfaction of a person who has found the right tool for the job. Outside, Clara caught not quotes, but the way men put on their coats when they are trying to remember what dignity looks like in January. By mid-afternoon, the snow decided to mean it. Big, obedient flakes that understood gravity and used it. I left the courthouse with my collar up and my hands in my pockets like a man who didn't mind being a cliché if it kept his fingers warm. I didn't go home. I drove to St. Michael's, to the chapel with the bent-back hymnal that opens to the page no one sings, but everyone recognizes. The volunteer at the desk looked up, recognized the look people have when they need to sit somewhere the world isn't, and nodded me down the hallway. The chapel was empty. It is always empty at 3:30 on weekdays, unless someone has been hurt. I slid into the back row and took the letters out. They made their old sound. Paper on paper, the rustle of a life I had for too long insisted on carrying like a proof I couldn't produce in court. One last time, I opened the one with the map book in it. "Your birthday is next week." I found a book with cities you've never been to. I don't know why, but it felt right to buy it anyway. I could see the counter where I'd written it. I could see the boy I'd written it to. I could see the man those sentences turned into when the envelope came back with red on it. I took a breath. Then I did not set them on fire. Churches and fires make bad metaphors. I slid the letters back into my coat and understood the different ending I needed. Not ash, but the choice to carry less forward than I had carried back. When I stepped outside, the sky had decided we all needed quiet. Snow does that. It mutes the town and gives you the lie that peace can be engineered. Peace can be chosen, not engineered. Al was on my porch when I got home, a shovel leaning against his knee like a companion. "Roads will be bad by 5 o'clock, he said. "You want me to hit your walk in the morning if you oversleep?" "I don't oversleep," I said. "I know," he said. "That's why I asked." We shoveled without talking, which is the best way men my age pray. When we were done, he held up a paper bag. "Wife insisted," he said. "Banana bread. She thinks your story is on the radio." I told her it's in the snow. He left. I took the bag inside and ate a slice over the sink as if crumbs were a sin my house could confess for me. The phone rang. Not the cell. The stubborn landline that refuses to be told the century has changed. I let it ring twice because men who answer on one ring sound lonely. "Mr. Brooks?" A woman's voice. Efficient, with a soft edge like a worn page. "Ms. Hahn," she said. The property manager from Riverbend Townhomes. I wanted you to know rent paid on time. She cried in my office and pretended she wasn't. I pretended I didn't see. That's the arrangement we prefer. Thank you, I said. She also asked if she could put a small bird feeder in the courtyard tree, Miss Hahn added, deadpan. I told her there is already one. I just hadn't introduced them yet. She hung up before I could say anything to break the line between function and kindness. Some people know how to keep fences useful. I was on my second piece of banana bread when the text came from a number I had saved without naming. He signed, Clara. I typed back, he signed. The paper will remember even when we want to forget. She sent a single period, which we had learned meant she understood. That night, I slept the way men sleep after a blizzard and a courthouse, shoulders still tight, legs satisfied with themselves. Morning arrived like it always does, rude, truthful, without music. I made coffee and set the gloves on the porch chair out of habit. At 5:55, headlights floated past my window and stopped. Footsteps. A knock that remembered itself. I opened the door to Werner, half smiling in the cold. His hair was doing the thing hair does under a beanie you forgot to pull on all the way. Lucas likes apple fritters too, I said. I'm expanding his menu, he said. He didn't step in. I didn't ask him to. He looked like a man who had put his mouth around the word again and found it nutritious. Dad, he said, and I felt something unglue somewhere in a small corner I had boarded up out of self-respect. I'll bring the kids by Sunday if that's okay. It is, I said. Bring the chalk plan. The walkway needs a new season. He nodded. The nod of a person who has found a map and decided to walk it without narrating. He left. The engine faded, and the house did not shrink. It stayed the size of its rooms. Friday came with a phone call from a number I hadn't seen since I learned to stop believing winter excuses bad behavior. August, Alaris said. I figured, I said. He told me about the bar, she said. 7 years. Counting starts now, I said. Silence on her end, the kind people pay therapists to help them name. I loved him, she said finally. Not as a plea, not as an explanation. As a line on a page that needed saying. I did too, I said. I still do. That's the problem with love. It doesn't make a good accountant. She made the sound of someone rehearsing a laugh and choosing not to. Hans says you're a zealot. Hans thinks any boundary is a sermon, I said. He doesn't like churches unless the homily is about him. He's leaving, she said, and the evenness of her voice gave the sentence the dignity she wanted. To Denver. They have a title there that sounds like advancement. And you? I asked. I'm staying, she said. The town knows my face. I think that's good for me, bad for the versions of me I've liked. We didn't bless each other. We said, take care, the way people do who have learned that blessing isn't something you speak once. It's something you do repeatedly until your hands hurt. Saturday, my town did what it always does when snow has made up its mind. It went quiet and domestic. Plows stitched seams down the middle of streets and left the edges unraveled. I baked muffins badly. I wrote MS. Miller a note that said, finches like sunflower seeds, and tucked it into a bag with blueberries I had not earned the right to buy in January. And then the chamber breakfast happened. Not the ugly one, the soft one. 2 weeks later, when the town had read the article and stopped shouting online and started deciding what story to tell themselves when they saw Werner at Hy-Vee. Clara texted the night before. If he's going to say it, he'll say it there. I showed up with the stubbornness of a man who doesn't like televised redemption, but is willing to put up with the room if the words are clean. Round tables again, scrambled eggs again, coats on the backs of chairs like flags of reluctant nations. Werner was on the small riser with a microphone. He held it like it might go live and bite him. He didn't ask the room for forgiveness. He didn't try to explain markets, timing, or teams. He said what he'd written in a notebook that had sawdust ground into the spine. I told people what they wanted to hear so they would give me what I wanted to spend, he began. I did that because it worked. When it stopped working, I blamed everything but the thing that had always been the problem, me. The order entered last week says I can't sit on a board or raise money for a long time. I earned that. If you need me before then, I'll be at the yard on North 14th unloading truck 3 by 9:30 on weekdays. If you're owed anything by me, you'll get checks on the 5th. If a 5th passes and nothing arrives, it will be because you have the wrong address or because I fainted. You have permission to ask which. Someone laughed, kindly. He didn't. My kids are learning to like a tree we didn't plant, he said. That helps. I won't say thank you to the person who arranged that because he hates gratitude when it comes with a speech. He prefers rent paid on time. He stepped down. The room did not applaud. It did something harder in a town this size. It made space around a man who had stopped filling it dishonestly. On my way out, Lucas caught my sleeve. He wrote that himself, he said, not hiding the pride he'd decided to feel. I told him if he used the word synergy, I'd make him restack pallets alphabetically. I went home. The furnace hummed. The house measured out the afternoon the way old houses do, with sounds that would be misdiagnosed as creaks if you didn't love them. At dusk, a text came from the number that had sent me the first thank you about 4 months back. We're getting birds already. Charlotte says the one with the red hair is the boss. I typed, woodpecker. He just thinks he is. 3 dots. Then you knew it was me, didn't you? I didn't. And I did. I wrote, Elara. A beat. I couldn't sign my name that night, she wrote. I didn't have one I liked. Thank you for the door. No one had to see you open it. I watched the screen until it dimmed. Then I set the phone down and said a small word that fit the new room. Peace. Sunday they came. A knock that tried not to be formal and succeeded. Charlotte with a paper grocery sack of chalks in colors that do not exist in nature. Leo with a pizza flyer and 97 opinions about toppings. Werner with his hands in his pockets and a look like a man still learning the difference between apology and performance. We went to the sidewalk. The snow had receded into the edges, leaving a gray canvas with salt constellations. Charlotte drew a line, and then a tree, and then a square for a window. She wrote 3 letters like the first time, and then, without asking, finished them. Grand. She colored the N on purpose too long, then looked up as if to dare us to correct her. No one did. Leo drew a football play that made no sense, and then revised it into one that would still lose yardage but with flair. He handed me a stick of chalk the color of optimism and made me draw a box, because boxes are useful. Werner stood with his hands in his pockets until pride lost its stamina. He knelt on one knee, then both, and colored in a corner someone else had abandoned. Harder than it looks, he said. Most things are, I said. We ate pizza at the table, because eating pizza while standing over the sink is a sacrament I reserve for when I'm alone. Greta did not come. She sent muffins. That is the language she knows. I answered in the dialect she understands best. I washed the tin and returned it with no note. It is possible to be fluent in a truce. After the kids sat on the floor with a board game that required honesty and dice, Werner rinsed plates in my sink and did not pretend he was good at it. And I went to the drawer and took out the letters one last time. Come outside, I said. We stood on the porch. The maple held a thin membrane of ice, catching light from the street in tiny, fatigued sparks. I held the stack and spoke to no one in particular and them both in all. These are the words I wrote when I couldn't get anyone to answer. I said. They were true then. They're heavy now. I don't need them to be heavy anymore. Werner's eyes found mine, then did something new, stayed. I didn't burn them. I didn't make a ceremony for a camera you keep in your head. I walked to the curbside bin, lifted the lid, and slid the letters into the blue container where paper goes when it has done its job and can go do a new one. Otunzabana kambanyu Google. On the way back up the steps, Charlotte slipped her hand into mine without asking permission from any of the adults in her life. Will they become something else? She asked, looking up. Yes, I said. That's what paper is for. Werner cleared his throat. He had a sentence ready, but had decided for once to make sure the words were needed. I'm going to be late sometimes, he said. With the checks, with the changing. I want to promise I won't, but I know I will. I'll call when I am. I'll say which one it is. I won't ask you to fix it. Good, I said. Leave fixing to people with tools and time. He nodded. It didn't look like surrender. It looked like someone was buying a pair of boots that fit better. When they left, Leo forgot his hat and came back pounding up the steps like a boy who has no idea yet how stairs teach knees about years. He set the hat on his head crookedly and said, I'm going to draw the end zone bigger next time. Good, I said. More room to tell the truth about where the line is. After they drove off, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like it had been used the right way and could rest until morning without worrying it would need to be a temple again. I made tea. I opened the window a half-inch to hear the last of the melt drip like a slow metronome from the gutter. The phone buzzed one more time. Lucas. He's on schedule. He's not fast. He's not late. He's learning to be boring. That's the point. I typed back. Tell him boredom pays better than drama over time. Lucas replied with a photo. Werner in a yellow vest, the forklift behind him, a stack of 2x4s squared to the world. His shoulders were doing the shape work Pride used to. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't performing. He looked like a man who had decided to be seen exactly as he was, which is the loudest kind of quiet. I turned off the light and stood once more at the door before locking it, letting the night come in and look around. Then I said it, not as a flourish, not as a brand, but as a truth that had learned to be spoken without apology. Peace.